Hi, folks. I'm going to call our meeting to order. I have regrets from Councillor Green, who is battling a bad cold and under these circumstances didn't think he'd spread his germs. He would normally be chairing PAC. Vice chair is Councillor Musa, who is not at least yet with us, so I will quarterback PAC, at least for the time being. So our first item of business is our land acknowledgement, and I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki and the district of Sipekne'katik, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Next, I would be looking for the approval of the agenda of all subcommittees. Councillor Garden-Cole.
Thank you, Madam Warden. I'm not sure if this requires an addition, but I would like to add a discussion to the PAC about the timing of the public hearing next week.
Okay, and we are having some discussion on the items going to public hearing. Is it agreed among council members that we would discuss the timing of that public hearing? I do have some notes, given the new restrictions that are coming in, that might certainly impact that discussion. So if it's agreed, we'll have that discussion during this committee. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Warden.
So we have a motion to approve the agenda. Is there any further discussion? And we did have a seconder. I'm not sure. Did you catch who it was? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. All contrary? Motion is carried. Give Councillor Musa a minute to get logged on. We'll move ahead to the approval of the minutes of November the 16th. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Question's been called. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary? Motion is carried. Now we will have the new employee introduction, after which we'll have an employee recognition, and I will turn the chair over to Councillor Musa.
Thank you, Warden.
Julianne is where we're at. The introduction is Julianne.
Thank you, Madam Warden. The new employee introduction this morning is for Julianne Cashin. She is our new communications officer here at the Municipality of East Hants. Julianne comes to us from Alberta. Her and her husband are both from Nova Scotia and have returned home. So we have been the lucky recipients of their return. Julianne worked for the city of St. Albert in Alberta for many years. So she has lots of experience giving guidance to councils and senior staff at that municipality around communications and managing media relations and whatnot. So we're looking forward to learning what she has to share with us and making sure that we continue to be good communicators, both with the public and with council and within the organization itself. So I'm very glad to have her here. She's been here for 2 weeks now, and so far so good. She keeps coming back, so we hope she has a long, happy career here at East Hants.
Welcome.
Welcome, Juliana. You want to say anything, or you're good? Okay. Okay, our next item is employee recognition. Dean Partridge, building official, 20 years.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Another little celebration. Dean's been with us for 20 years now. And what is true now about building officials was true 20 years ago. That is, they're hard to find. And we were lucky back then to lure him away from Annapolis County, where he was working. And he's been here ever since, going flat out like the other guys. And because of his experience from Annapolis, he was also a natural for the role of heritage officer, which he's filled for many years as well, issuing what we call certificates of appropriateness to make sure when somebody does a renovation to a heritage property that they're done right. And again, we're lucky to have him for the last 20 years and hopefully for several more. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay. Our next item is W.M. Ferris Architect, mixed-use development in Enfield. Final report, Debbie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the applicant is W.M. Ferris Architects on behalf of Monk Mobile Corporation Limited and Allison Land Surveyors Limited. And the proposal is to change the land use designation of 3 PIDs in Enfield to a walkable comprehensive development district and to enter into a development agreement with the Municipality of East Hants. A total of 18 townhouse units and 3 multiplexes. So for a total of 198 dwelling units, with 1 multiplex having commercial space on the ground floor are being proposed. So here we have the map of the subject properties. There's 3 properties that are part of the application for a total of 2.69 hectares. The properties are split zoned, so there is mixed use commercial on the front adjacent to Highway 2 and R2 in the back. The R2 portion of the property as of right.
Excuse me, Debbie, have to pause you for a moment. Councillor Eisner had a declaration to make, I believe.
Conflict of interest on this project. I'll just,
And Shirley has the book. Sorry, we got a little ahead of ourselves. Thank you.
had my light up.
Keep on going, Debbie.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I was saying, the R2 portion of the lands as of right would allow for single and 2-unit dwellings. And the mixed-use center zone up front would allow for a variety of uses. They would allow for multiplexes, small and large. They'd allow for mixed-use capable buildings. And it would allow for commercial uses such as funeral homes, auto detailing, retail, doctor's offices. As of right, the height is 15 meters for a mixed-use building, and potentially you could get 126 units off of that land if you were able to put 3 mixed-use buildings on it. And then this here is the site plan. Oh, and I should mention that there's a right-of-way easement for the services, a service easement, in favor of the municipality, and this is where our water and wastewater run, right down through here. So this is the application from W.M. Ferris Architects. It proposes the extension of Lacey Ann Avenue down to Trunk 2, so Highway 2 along the front here, and this is White Road. It proposes 18 townhouses with all but 4 on the proposed Lacey Ann extension, and 4 more over on White Road. It proposes a 4-story apartment building and 2 6-story apartment buildings, and the one on the corner of White Road and Highway 2 is proposed to have ground floor commercial uses. So the entire ground floor, which is approximately 12,000 square feet, it proposes to have above ground and underground parking, and it would be in compliance with our land use bylaw parking requirements. The extension of Lacey Ann Avenue is proposed to have a sidewalk along it with their street tree requirements, with paired driveways for the townhouses and a proposed access walkway to the Concord Way Park at the rear of lot 1 and 2 here. The extension of Lacey Ann Avenue would come out to right-in, right-out access. And the Department of Infrastructure and Operations has requested that this not be used as a cut-through, so there'll be removable bollards for emergency purposes to separate the two parking areas. Also in front of the mixed-use building here is proposed to be hardscaped areas, so hardscape plazas to allow for commercial access, those commercial premises, so if there was a cafe or such on the bottom floor, they could use this quasi-public hardscaped area for their cafe setup. They're also proposing to take that hardscape area, and there's no sidewalk on this portion of White Road, so take and wrap it down to where the entrance is to the driveway, so that would allow for a safe pedestrian access from the front of the building down to the sidewalk here. I just went through the purpose, so I won't read that again, but there's also a proposed 460 square meter community outdoor area, and that's for the residents living in the apartment buildings. So that's an amenity space, and that would be proposed to be used as a barbecue area with a shade for like a use of a gazebo or a pergola and some garden space. And the development agreement portion, just to talk about development agreements, is a legal contract between the municipality and the property owner. It sets out the terms and conditions under which the development of lands are to take place. Development agreement allows staff and council to consider open space, commercial requirements, and other items at an earlier stage of the development. So, policy analysis. The policy that allows council to consider the application is IM 10 and IM 12. Municipal council shall consider private applications to amend the municipal planning strategy where said amendments are in the best interest of the municipality, and council shall consider mapping amendments when a request is received for a zoning amendment that is not consistent with the municipal planning strategy's maps but is consistent with the intent of the municipal planning strategy. And staff feel the application is an interesting proposal which utilizes an underdeveloped piece of service land and creates a continuous urban form along Highway 2. I'm going to go into the comments from each of our reviewing agencies now. So, infrastructure and operations. If approved, a servicing plan will be required indicating how the proposed development will be serviced with water and wastewater. So, as I mentioned about the driveway connection, they just wanted the removable bollards between the two parking areas so that they cannot be used as a cut-through, but can still be used for emergency services and for pedestrian use. The municipality doesn't reserve capacity, and this development would be subject to available capacity at time the development agreement is entered into, if approved. Nova Scotia Environment and Climate Change, so they have identified a small portion of land behind the Child Care Centre as a wetland, and the applicant has received the necessary approvals to alter that wetland in accordance with Nova Scotia Environment regulations. The Municipal Economic and Business Development staff has indicated that the proposed development is in line with the East Hants strategic plan goal to ensure the availability of suitable land and space in East Hants to support business and economic growth, the economic development plan goal to market and investment ready, and the East Hants economic recovery plan goal to help businesses find suitable facilities, locations, and equipment to reestablish or adjust. The department has no concerns with the proposed application. Fiscal impact analysis. So as part of a review of applications, we look at the fiscal impact, and fiscal impact analysis for the proposed development has been completed by our finance staff. And the application will provide the municipality with a financial benefit of approximately $114,368 annually after all expenses have been paid if all 198 dwelling units are constructed. Enfield Volunteer Fire Department should receive an additional fire levy of $21,685 per year from taxes once the development is complete to help provide for fire and emergency services. So Parks, Recreation and Culture indicated that they would like to have that walkway that connects from the proposed extension of Lacey Ann Avenue to the park at Concord Way. And this is the park right here on Concord Way. So right now there's a playground there for anybody that hasn't visited the site. In addition, at time of subdivision, they also wanted the ability to negotiate for a larger piece of land at the back of these townhouses. The townhouses don't need to go all the way to the end. So they could potentially negotiate for a larger piece of land. And if no additional parkland is acquired, the municipality shall accept cash in lieu of parkland or work in kind, or a combination of both, equal to 9.3% of assessed value of the proposed lots at time of subdivision, at time of endorsement of final plan of subdivision. So Nova Scotia Public Works, they were the reviewing agency that took the longest to get back to negotiate with. And so they'll permit the extension of Lacey Ann Avenue out to Highway 2 with only a right-in and a right-out intersection design. And that would mean there was a median in the Highway 2 here to prevent left-turning traffic. The extension will That extension would be based, the design would have to be approved by Nova Scotia Public Works. And at the extension of White Road, or not extension, but at the intersection of White Road and Highway 2, Nova Scotia Public Works would want to see a signalized intersection. And what that would mean is that there would be a set of traffic lights added to that intersection design to help control traffic. And that would allow for that crosswalk to go across Highway 2 over to Avery's. So it would give those safe landing spots on either side of the Highway 2 for that crosswalk to be put in with the traffic signals. And I should note that the traffic impact analysis that was undertaken by the applicant indicated that with the existing traffic that's there right now, so this doesn't include the proposed development, that the current White Road and Highway 2 intersection is already over capacity. So according to that study, it doesn't matter if this application gets approved or not, there should be something done to that intersection to help with the overload of the capacity just from the existing development in White Estates. Schnecktas Centre, Regional Centre for Education, was approved, was provided information about the application, was asked to provide their comments. However, no comments have been received, and this isn't unusual. In the past, they've indicated that they do not want to influence development applications and they want to remain neutral, which is why they generally do not comment on development applications. And to further to that, when we've met with them in the past, they said that they basically react to enrollment. So if they find the enrollment is increasing, they'll react to that enrollment. It's not what we'd like to hear. We'd like to have some comments from them, but unfortunately, they've chosen not to comment. Planning staff analysis. So the application by WM Fair's Architects has been polarizing, and many residents have negative feelings about the proposal. However, the proposed application is an example of the new urbanist style of development that East Hants Council has endorsed through their official community plan. So on the following page are the positive attributes of the proposal and the reasons why staff believe the application should be approved and is in keeping with the land use policies of the official community plan. So higher density development is located along Highway 2 and away from existing lower density development in the subdivision. Proposed 4-story apartment buildings are to be located approximately 40 meters from existing single unit and 2-unit development. So I had our GIS coordinator just do me up this little map just showing the distances away from the existing structures. And the 6-story apartment buildings are proposed to be approximately 60 meters away from existing dwellings. Locating higher density development at the front of the subdivision along Highway 2 reduces the amount of traffic traveling through the subdivision, and it provides a node of density, which is important to a future transit system if it ever takes place in East Hants. So you want your transit system to go along your main corridor, and you want your dwellings to be located in the main corridor so that it makes that transit system more likely to succeed. Residents of the proposed apartment buildings who may not have access to a vehicle have access to sidewalks and the pedestrian network to allow them to access the amenities in Enfield and Elmsdale. And again, the sidewalk goes right along Highway 2 in front of the proposed development, so people could walk into Enfield Village Core, or they could walk into the Elmsdale Village Core. Commercial development is proposed to be integrated into the first floor of the multiplex at the corner of White Road and Highway 2, with a small hardscape plaza and bike parking to be installed in front of the building. This will allow for at-grade access to the commercial development from the sidewalk along Highway 2. This commercial space is not required for an as-of-right development, and the size of the commercial space is approximately 1,114 meters squared, which is approximately 12,000 square feet. So again, it's something that we wouldn't be seeing probably as of right. Providing an urban street wall and increasing commercial activity along Highway 2 should naturally help calm traffic in the area. Installation of signalized intersection at White Road and Highway 2 allows for a crosswalk across Highway 2, which permits residents of White Estates to safely cross Highway 2 to access Avery's Farm Market. The extension of Lacey Ann Avenue would allow for better connectivity for pedestrians and vehicular traffic. A walkway connects the Concord Way Park to White Estates, and there's an option for additional land to increase the size of the park. The developer will be required to have a walkway connecting the front of the mixed-use building facing Highway 2 along White Road to the driveway entrance on White Road, thereby creating a safe pedestrian space where there currently is no sidewalk. And the proposed development utilizes an underdeveloped piece of land in the serviced area, and wastewater and water services are not required to be expanded to service the development. So the services already run through the subject lands. It's not like they have to put in new lift stations and extend the main pipes along Highway 2 as we have with some of the other developments. Again, this is just showing the proposed development overlaid with an air photo, and I think the air photo is fairly current. I think it was from the spring. So it shows, again, the apartment buildings along the front here, the 4-story one, the townhouses, the extension of Lacey Ann Avenue with a right-in, right-out. As I mentioned before, the intersection at this location would have to be signalized, and the commercial portion of this building would be on the ground floor, and that would be at grade with the sidewalk, thereby allowing for a quasi-public hardscape plaza to be in front. And we've asked them to put a hardscape connection into the sidewalk at the back where the parking is to be located. Citizen engagement. An advertisement outlining the application and indicating it had been received and under review by staff was placed in the weekly press on June 5th, 2019. PIM for the initial application and site plan was held in July of 2019. A second public information meeting for the updated application was held on January 5th, 2021. First reading of the proposed municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw amendments and initial consideration of the development agreement was given by council at their April 2021 meeting. A questionnaire was mailed to residents within 300 meters of the subject lands asking for their comments, and results of those questionnaires have been provided to Planning Advisory Committee members for their review. In general, comments made on the questionnaires were similar to the comments made at the public information meetings. In addition, a few of the return questionnaires also mentioned other development taking place in Enfield that is not being considered as part of this application. Many of the concerns raised by residents have been addressed under the policy analysis section of the report, such as items related to traffic, intersection design, the crosswalk, and school capacity. Parking will be addressed by the minimum parking requirements of the land use bylaw, because I know parking was another concern. And building height was identified by many of the residents who responded to the questionnaire. The 4-story multiplex is approximately 40 meters from the existing development in White Estates, and the 6-story buildings are approximately 60 meters away. Under the land use bylaw, the mixed-use center zone permits a mixed-use capable building, to be constructed to a height of 15 meters, which would permit a 4-story building if the building was constructed of wood, or a 5-story building if the building was constructed of concrete. And the reason that's different is the span in between the floors. With a wood building, you need a larger span, whereas a concrete building, you don't need such a large span in between the two floors. In addition, there's a 4-story building currently being constructed of wood and lands that would be similar height to the proposed 6-story buildings that are being constructed of concrete, and that's due to the ground floor level of the proposed 6-story building being constructed at grade with existing sidewalks. So that makes a big difference how far your buildings pop out of the ground. In conclusion, the applicant's proposal has been evaluated using all applicable policies in the municipal planning strategy. Planning staff and the developer have worked together to create a plan that allows the developer to achieve the density they are looking for while ensuring that the municipality receives approximately 1,114 meters squared of commercial space, a quasi-public hardscape plaza, a walkway from the plaza to the entrance of the driveway access on White Road, bike racks in front of the building adjacent to the commercial area, intersection improvements, and the ability to increase the size of the Concord Way Park. These items work together to encourage pedestrian-oriented activity and connections, and helps to create a possible transit node to support future transit along Highway 2, all of which are items that contribute to the new urbanist form of a development that the council has endorsed in their official community plan, in particular at the Walkable Comprehensive Development District. Staff are recommending approval of the application. And I just want to note that when staff reviews these applications, we look at what can be done as of right and what can be done through this development agreement. And we look at it from the point that we want to have the development look better than what could be done as of right, or be better, provide more to council and to the residents surrounding. So that's one of the reasons why we are proposing that the application be approved is because we believe it is a better application than what could be done as of right. And there's just a chart down here at the bottom. And recommendation that second reading and approval be given to the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw mapping amendments, and final consideration and approval be given to entering into a development agreement for lands identified as the 3 PIDs there in Enfield. And there's the recommended motion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Debbie. First, we have the warden.
Thank you. Just before we get into the discussion on this development, I thought this was probably the easiest time to discuss the timing of the public hearing before we get tied up in the yays and nays. And I do have 3 options on what the possibilities are. And given the new restrictions announced by Dr. Strang yesterday, we're back to 50% capacity as of Friday, and all the other restrictions that go with that. And given that this particular development has generated a lot of public interest, and we do not feel we're pretty sure we couldn't accommodate the numbers of public who would want to come to the public hearing in council chambers, even using 168 and maintain the 6-foot physical distancing. So we do have 3 options I'll just put out there. We can proceed as planned and limit the public members and redirect the public that we can't admit to go to the chat feature on the YouTube live stream. The risk is we don't have any way to advertise or get a notice out, so we'd be relying on social media and word of mouth, and we might have to turn people away at the door. Comm staff would monitor the chat and ask questions and make comments on behalf of the residents. Second option would be to proceed using the Zoom and YouTube live stream features. The risk is that we're down staff due to the holidays, and our new comm staff has not yet been fully trained or tested on the systems to ensure this would go off smoothly. We would have to do some quick training and testing. And with Zoom, we would also have to make a decision as to whether council and staff would be in chambers or whether we would simply put the whole meeting on the Zoom platform. The third option is to delay the public hearings until January, which gives us time to advertise and plan for either in-person or virtual options, and it would give us more time to train and test staff. So those are the options. I wanted to put that out there, and given that also there has been a lot of concern with the timing of the public hearing as well. So those are the 3 options that we have. So thank you.
Thank you, warden.
Oh, just a sec. I'll fix it. You leave your mouse. No. Leave your mouse. There. Sorry,
Okay.
little technical difficulties.
Thank you. Okay, we have next Councillor Michael Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff. Interested in the comments and the report. So when I look at this, is it fair to say the 2 multiplexes at the very beginning, at the very front of the development along Highway 2, those can go in as of right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, what's permitted as of right are mixed-use capable buildings, so buildings that could potentially have a mixture of uses. They don't have to. It just has to be built, the first floor has to be built to a higher standard. Maximum of 42 units in each building. You could have a maximum of 3 buildings per lot. And the height of the buildings could be 15 meters. If it was constructed of wood, that would be 4 stories. If it was constructed of concrete, that would be 5 stories.
So basically, through the development agreement, there's an extra story going in on
Yeah.
Highway 2.
Yeah, 3.5 meters is the height that would increase by.
And then the townhouses would not be permitted in the R2.
That's correct.
Okay. Because I'm just trying to wrap my head around, like, I understand, increasing the park size, the walkway, a lot of that. I'm just, so the benefits of the development, I'm trying to understand the differences, what they can do right as of right to what they can move to and the overall impact. And I'll just wait and listen for more. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Next, we have Councillor Knockwood.
I was wondering about the wetlands now. How big is it? How many acres? And what's the questions about wetlands going to the province?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Knockwood, the wetlands are just located right here in behind of the existing daycare. It's just a small bit of land, and it's probably the size of one, maybe getting into the second lot too. And the developer did approach Nova Scotia Environment, applied for and received the ability to alter those wetlands. So, and they've paid for that alteration permit already.
Okay. Now, my question is now when the province and developers or anything, do they do a study on what's in the wetlands, like different types of species of turtles or frogs or whatever?
So you, Mr. Chair, I'm unfamiliar with how they categorize wetlands.
Yeah, like me too, because I've seen different reports on wetlands before, and with different types of fish in the river, right? So, like another one is, how far is the river to that area? Is there any?
The river would be on the other side, so there's a railway track here.
Yeah,
It would be on the other side of the railway track, so over here.
500 meters, 600 meters, you think?
No, more than that. I don't know, I'd have to measure it
Okay,
out.
no, that's just, because every time we alter wetlands and, I don't know, the species who live in wetlands have the right also to live. Huh? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Knockwood. Oh. Okay, Councillor Rhino.
Yeah, as far as the public hearing part of this, I do believe it should be delayed. I'm not a Zoom person, and I think that this application has gathered a lot of negativity toward it on a lot of cases, and I think the public should be heard. And I feel that in-person meetings and when people put their thoughts across in person mean a lot more than doing this on a screen and us viewing it from there. So I don't know, is there an option if so many rules exist in January? Can we hold that public meeting over a 3-month or a 3-meeting or 4-meeting to fit the number of people who may wish to speak in person than holding it on one night of Zoom? Is that an option? And I have further things after, but I'd like that question. Could that be an option out there?
Okay, who want to take this one? John?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, you can end a public hearing and then extend it to another night. There's always risk with that in that you're not supposed to receive new information post-public hearing. So if you're kind of in between, there's days in between segments of a public hearing, there's always a risk that, conversations and so on. But yes, technically that is an option, I guess.
Well, I do believe that in this case, the people want to be heard and they want to have it. And it doesn't, it's not the same on a screen as it is in person, because I do believe that. It's not the same. And I think that the people in this area would want to be heard. And I think, it's my opinion that we should work toward, even if they have to call in and make appointments for one night and some group coming another night, depending on the numbers, we could work that. I think it's very important to hear on this is a contentious subject, and The people should be heard. So I'd be open to any kind of suggestion along that. But to have this in December, next week, I don't agree with it. Also, I'm going to take, with this report, I'm going to take a little bit of exception. I'm going to quote, "Staff believe that this application should be approved," is in the final report. It's my opinion the staff should not believe. Staff should present the application, present the facts, and let this committee do the consideration and make a judgment on it. I do not feel, this is only personal, that should be in a final report, staff believe. They can put that in a recommendation at the end, fine. But I took exception to that in the report. And I also took an exception to tying this in with transit, and this would be a way to get transit if we allowed this application. Again, we shouldn't mix the two in, and that may be another staff belief, and I don't think that should be mixed into an application. Well, if we do this, we're gonna, make a better case for transit. That, to me, that doesn't fly. I personally, as of right, they can do 42, if I'm correct, 42 under times 3 buildings, is that correct, under that? And the
126
4-story?
units, yeah.
That's right. So then, development, if this is approved, it's gonna move to 6-story and 180, is that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, so 180 in the apartment units, as of right would be 126, 18.5 meters in the height through an development agreement, and 15-meter height as of right.
Well, I do believe that even as of right, I don't even agree with that. But as of right, it is as of right. I think that, you drive up recently through that trunk tube, and it just looks like an apartment factory going up through that thing. I don't live in this area, but to me, it's changing, and it's changing rapidly, and for a lot of people that I know in this area, it's not changing for the better. But as of right is as of right. But to moving to a 6-story and 180 people, I don't think that this is what we envisioned Enfield to be so many years ago. And really, I can't support any more than that, than what's as of right, and I really don't agree with that. So I'm just going to leave that at right now, and I may comment further. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Rhino. The warden want to answer.
Thank you. Just wanted the opportunity to address the comments about staff recommending this development agreement. And I understand that sometimes we're a little frustrated, but that's staff's job. Staff's job is to review the application. They're the professionals, and that's what they're supposed to do, tell us whether they think it's a good agreement or bad agreement. We don't always agree with them, but staff were simply doing their jobs by making the recommendation they made, as they would have been doing had they recommended the opposite way. They would have been telling us that they felt it should or should not go forward. And so just felt I wanted to defend staff there, because all the years I've been here, that's what staff have been doing. So, thank you.
Thank you, warden. We have the CAO to comment on that.
Also, as a follow-up to the transit comment, I think what Debbie said in her presentation was, if you had transit, you would want your higher density along your main road. So this isn't in any way saying, if you have these, you're going to need transit. That's not at all what the indication in the report was. If you eventually get to a transit system, which East Hants is, maybe it's not this year, maybe it's not in 10 years, but eventually we will likely need a transit system. If you get there, you want your higher density at the front of that subdivision along that main route, so your transit system doesn't have to go into subdivisions to pick up the majority of its ridership. Thank you.
Thank you, CAO. Debbie, to add up to Councilor Rhino, the 126 units are on the MC zone only, not including whatever they can get on the R2 zone, right?
That's correct. The entire R2 zone could be developed in accordance with our subdivision bylaw regulations and our land
So
use
they can
bylaw.
put a road, they can add so many units in there. Any
Yeah.
idea how many units will be there? So everybody will be on track?
Through Mr. Chair, no, I never did a calculation. They could potentially, I guess, I don't know if they'd have enough room, but they could potentially put a road back here, maybe put units, fill in this area here and get a few more units than what you'd get off of the extension of Lacey Ann Avenue, because they'd want to maximize the R2 portion of the land, I imagine.
No, I just want to make sure that everybody knows that the 126 unit are not including the R2 zone. Thank
That's
you.
correct.
Okay, next we have Councilor Garden Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple of parts to my response. I'd like to move that the public hearing be postponed until January and possibly done in segments or else in succession to accommodate people if there are still restrictions at that time.
Any seconder?
Second, I guess.
Move in second, we go to the vote. Oh, discussion, yeah, so.
Question?
Okay, so. So move in second, any, Walter, oh, okay, Walter, you're on before the motion, you wanna, is it toward the motion or? Not, okay. So, you won't speak about it, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I can support the motion, but I would also like the motion to include the ability to do the public hearing the way we did when restrictions were in previously when we were on Zoom, because we don't know what's going to happen in January, and we could plan to do this in sessions, but come January, God forbid, we could be locked down and only able to do Zoom meetings. And I don't think whether we support, whether supporting the development or not supporting the development, it's not fair to the developer to not consider the matter if we make a motion that limits us to in-person public hearings, because that could be a month, but it could be 6 months or 8 months. We don't know. So that's my only caveat, that whatever we decide, I guess I would move an amendment to the motion that would say, or to allow the public hearing to be held via Zoom if necessary. I would move that amendment.
Any seconder for the amendment? Move in second, any discussion about the amendment? See none, we go to the vote on the amendment.
Missing votes.
Somebody. Thank you, Councilor Hebb. Okay, the motion has passed unanimously.
No, it
The
hasn't. No, it hasn't. Passed 10 to 1.
10 to 1, yeah.
And
And who's voting no?
Individual results. Individual results.
What?
Individual results.
I voted against it.
Okay,
With Councilor
yeah,
Knox.
Councilor Knock was voting nay. Thank you. Okay, we go back now to me. Where do I go now? All right, now we have any more discussion about the motion?
Sorry, can I continue?
Yeah, you're still on.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought we just voted on it.
We voted on the amendment, yeah. You want to speak about the motion, Councilor?
No.
No, okay,
Thought we were done.
okay. So, Norval, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I'm just waiting to do something else, not the motion.
Okay. So, no more discussion about the motion. We go to the vote on the main motion. On the, yeah. Okay, and the motion is passed unanimously. Okay. Next, we have Sandra. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think that in the past week, my fellow councillors have got a feel for how the residents feel about this development, which is what I've been hearing all along. Literally hundreds of residents have reached out to me, not just from District 1, not just people who live in close proximity, because a development like this doesn't just affect the people who live within close proximity. It affects the people who live in District 10 who are in Enfield, the people who live in Elmsdale, the people who drive through. It affects the people who are looking at this development and thinking, wow, they're thinking of doing that development there, but essentially that type of development could be on both sides of the road all the way along that zoning from the Magnolia to Strides approximately. So I'm getting approached by people at the Santa Claus Parade, at work, by phone, by email. The response and objection to this development is significant. To say that this application is an example of the new urbanist style of development that East Hants Council has endorsed through their official community plan makes me realize that we need to review, and I think we are in the process of reviewing what East Hants' official community plan is for that area. When you get this many people opposed to this kind of development in their area, we really need to take a long, hard look at what we put in place and what it's going to look like. I don't know what else to say about it other than, you know, the residents are, and it's not just, I know that there's bells and whistles and attractions about this development, you know, sidewalks and lights and things that people desperately need. And, you know, it would be great to have them without this kind of development. You're talking about single-family dwellings butting up against this kind of development. You only have to put yourself in that situation to imagine what the residents are going through. And not only that, but residents who, as I say, not even living in that area, who don't want the face of our community to look like this going forward. And that's all I have to say about it right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garden-Cole. Next, we have Councillor Walter Tingley. You're still John McDonald here, so.
Pardon me? I have a question of the staff through the chair. How many questionnaires did we send out to residents?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe there was almost 150, and we had 22 questionnaires returned. There's a difference in the number of questionnaires that went out compared to the number of letters that went out advertising the public hearing, just because Concord Way wasn't all the way developed at the first, and it was developed at the end of the thing, so.
Okay. Because I've read those questionnaires, but I haven't heard from hundreds of people. I basically received a form email from approximately 20 people stating their displeasure to the development. My second question through the chair to staff would be, if council did vote this down, how likely would the developer be to be successful if they appealed it?
So you, Mr. Chair, for the redesignation and the rezoning of land, it's not appealable to the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board. It's only if you were to rezone and redesignate the land and then turn down the development agreement, that they could then appeal. So whenever we change our policy, our planning policy, that's not appealable to the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board. It's if somebody applies to amend either the land use bylaw, which includes our land use bylaw maps, or enter into a development agreement, at those 2 times that they can appeal to the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board.
So they cannot appeal,
That's correct.
changing the zoning.
That's correct. It's changing the future land use designation and the zoning, so it's a combination of 2 things.
Right. That's it?
Thank you, Councillor. Okay. Next, we have Deputy Warden Mitchell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good discussion this morning. I have a comment and then a couple of questions for staff. With all developments, we always hear the negative part, but we never seem to hear the people that are in favor of developments going forward, who are looking for rental property, so they can get into an apartment, et cetera, et cetera. And some of the ones that reach out to me saying they're afraid to say anything, be in favor of it because of the repercussions from friends or neighbors. And my question to staff is, if this proposal is not approved, how soon could the developer start developing as of right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, basically, if the development is not approved, the applicant could submit a site plan approval immediately.
Would they have to go through a public hearing for that?
No, site plan approval is an as-of-right, so the development officer checks to make sure that they meet all the criteria in the land use bylaw. They approve the site plan approval if it's in accordance with everything within our land use bylaw. It goes out to people within 30 meters of the subject property, saying that the development officer has given her approval. It can be appealed to council, but council cannot make any decision that the developer could make unless the developer was wrong in their interpretation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, that's
all,
all.
Council, Deputy Warden. Is that all?
That's all, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have Councillor Hatt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of comments and a question through the staff, but I'm certainly disappointed in the Education Department, as we are every application that comes in here. And we asked for information from all levels, the RCMP and the police and all that, and Department of Transportation. And we get responses from them, and education is a very important part of this process, because the units we put in there, we don't really know how many children is going to be there and what impact it's going to have in education. And it sounds to me like the Education Department is, okay, we'll wait till it's built and then we'll decide, make a decision on it. And to me, that's not acceptable. And I don't know whether the municipal government can have some way into this or not, but it's very important to all municipalities in Nova Scotia that they get as much information as they can. And I know it's out of our hands, and I'll leave it there. Very good staff report. I think everything there should be. Regardless of what information is there, it's important for me as a councillor to get all the information, whether it's directly related to that project or may have an impact on that project. And that way you can better informed of what the decision you make. You can be confident that you've researched everything. So the transit thing is just a part of that. And your professional opinion is important to me. I may not always agree with it, but it stands out to me that this is what staff feels it's going to be. My question through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, Department of Transportation, when they look at this, do they look at the impact it has on the road that's there, like number 2, or just the intersections, or do they look at the whole impact?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Hebb, they look at the whole impact. So we actually sat down with Public Works a couple times, the last time here in, I think it was October, and we had a long discussion about Highway 2, the connections, what we could propose to do with the application, and even had discussions about other applications. And so we do take it serious with our engineering team, and we had our own engineers there at the meeting, and looked at the highway, looked at the connections, and talked about the best way to service those developments.
And I understand, I know staff has done their part. I'm more interested in what decision the department makes, what bases it. I mean, my gosh, they should come over here sometime, and especially during rush hours, and have a look at it. Even through the day, like number 2 is hectic, no matter what part of the day it is. And, you know, adding more development, not only this, but other developments in it, it's only going to increase that. And the road is to capacity. For people who live there, it's a nightmare to get out. It's a nightmare to get out of subdivisions. And for me, that's a major issue. I mean, I've gone through there several times, and you know, you're stopped. You people pulling out in front of you when they shouldn't be, because that's the only chance they can get out is run, you know, to run into you. So that's a major concern to me is the impact that the traffic it's having here. So you look at emergency services. If an ambulance comes there and traffic's backed up, you know, well, you're supposed to pull over. Not everybody knows that. Same as the fire department, the police. You know, it just seems to me that DOT is lacking the resources in order to give us a good, confident answer if they've done their research. And apparently to me that every time there's an application, it just seems like it's a paper shuffle. They're not really doing their job as an impact. I mean, when they do their impact, they must go out at night, I guess, and count the cars at night instead of in the daytime. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hebb. Okay, next we have Councilor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just through you to staff, hearing all the discussions, and I agree with a lot of the points other councilors are making. I have a question in regarding to lot 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6, where they had the townhouses. And it's, I mean, obviously lot 4 can be done as of right because it's an R2 and there's 2 dwellings on it. The other lots, are they subdividable enough to still have the same capacity based upon their size? So I'm looking at, because this is all zoned R2, right?
Yes.
And they're putting four dwellings on an R2 zone.
Through you, Mr. Chair, through the application, the whole entire property would be redesignated and rezoned to Walkable Comprehensive Development District, which allows for a variety of mixes. So that's how they're applying to put the townhouses. And then they're on-street townhouses, so each townhouse unit would be subdivided.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if
If it was done as of right?
it was done as of right, they could subdivide the property and then just stagger the 2 units on 2 separate pieces.
Yeah.
Is the pieces of property big enough to do that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. They could make, I'm just trying to get to my R2 lands here. So they have all this land here. There would be enough room to put some R2. What they would probably do is change the road design, maybe. I don't know. They'd have to meet our minimum standards, but they might be able to do like an elbow and come out onto White Road here, which would allow them to put more units within this area, and then maybe some on the other side of the apartment building here. So they would probably want to maximize that R2 portion of land.
And the reason I'm asking this question is the developer has the right to develop their land. It's their land, and we have to listen to the concerns of the residents. And I really like to get an idea of, as of right, the number of units we're talking about, because right now we can see, as per the development agreement, the number of units and how it's laid out. We don't know how it could go the other way, and I'm just trying to figure out, just looking right now and not being a planner and not understanding the bylaws as well as you guys do, if all of the townhouses really could be fit in there as of right already, the only thing we're talking about is 6 different units along Highway 1 and the 48 in the Lot 5 is the only difference between as of right and the development agreement. Is that correct? And again, on Lot 5, there could be a lot, that 48 units could be decreased by the amount of R2 units they fit in there.
Yeah, so potentially there would be probably up to 126 units in the MC zone portion of the land. And then depending on the road network and what we would permit under our municipal standards, all of this area here could be developed as well as the stuff here, and this building here would have development potential. So you might be able to get another 20 to 30 R2 units in there, so.
Okay, so
And it would be just, it would all depend on what we would permit under the road network. That's something I just can't answer off the cuff, because I don't know if we would allow,
I'm just trying to get a feel that
radius,
as
yeah.
of right,
you
the
probably.
difference between as of right and as a development agreement, the total units we're looking at is probably somewhere between the range of 12 to 20? Potentially?
In the R2 portion?
For the entire development.
The difference?
The difference between
Okay.
what they could do as
Just
of right.
Let me do some quick math there. I'd say there's probably about a 32 unit difference.
A 32 unit
Yeah,
difference.
just
That's
doing
what-
off the cuff.
Off the cuff, yeah. And that's without them. And then there's other ways they could get more or less dependent upon the road network. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I want to understand was what is the difference in units between what they can possibly do as of right to what they can do under development agreement, because we have more control of how things will look under a development agreement. And maybe this lot layout isn't the development agreement we want, but I just trying to wrap my head around the actual total impact on the land, because they do have the ability to do stuff to that land, and we want to make sure that it fits within what the community can handle and want as well. So thank you. This goes to my consideration.
Thank you, Councilor Perry. Next, we have the warden.
Thank you. I just wanted to go back when staff did their report, and we talked, and following up on Councilor Hebb's comments. The traffic study that was done showed that White Estates is already at overcapacity.
Yes.
That intersection. Is that, now refresh my mind, I don't live in the area. Is that road, White Road, is that a municipal or a provincial road?
White Road is a municipal road, and of course, Highway 2 is a provincial road. Just for information, the traffic study was done, I believe, last April, and it was done during the day, and that was prior to the lockdown happening in May. And what they said is that the background volumes currently put that intersection already over capacity, so.
So we already have a problem at that intersection. I think that's kind of a given. It's already at overcapacity. So my question is, and I'm not presuming, I'm just trying to weigh all the information that's similar to Councilor Perry, but should we not agree to the rezoning? And should the developer come in with for site plan approval? How would the information that we have concerning the fact that we already have one entrance and exit to Highway 2, between White Road and Highway 2, and that is already at overcapacity, could we, in all good faith, give any approval for developments there, knowing we were contributing to a problem that's already existing?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the applicant already has a commercial driveway access for the Curley's Pup and Portable lands, so they may be able to use that existing commercial access and just bypass the entrance into White Road.
But I guess my question is the fact that the White Road intersection, we now know, is at overcapacity, is that a determining factor when we go to approve anything as of right for these properties, should they want to exit and enter onto White Road?
It depends on what the comments come back from Nova Scotia Public Works. If they give permission for the access onto White Road using that intersection or not, is not a determining factor in our land use bylaw.
No, I am very confused by this, because I've been told that White Road is a municipal road.
Yes.
So therefore, I would think it would be a municipal responsibility to determine if whether or not we fed 100, between 1 and 200 somewhere, more units of traffic onto White Road. Would we not be, morally obligated to look at the bigger picture, as Councilor Hebb has said, as to, where's it going to go if we let it exit onto White Road? Would we not have to consider that as well?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the warden, I'm not quite sure if we do that now for site plan approval, consult with our own municipal engineers for traffic capacity. I know with the Tyler Street extension and stuff, that wasn't a consideration. I'll just check with the director of I&O there to see if, I know it hasn't been done in the past on certain applications. As I said, the Tyler Street extension was done and put in, and there was no traffic impact analysis done for that application.
Through Madam Chair, Madam Warden, the for municipal roads, that's not something we currently look at in detail on new development applications. We review traffic impact studies when it's interconnected with provincial roads. That's been our trigger historically. We just haven't been big enough to get into that to this point. So where White Road is a municipal road, we are highly involved in the discussions around the overall traffic impact study where it comes out into the two, and that's where our interests were focused on. So overall, the White Road piece is there is interest in amending some things on White Road, but that needs to be also tied into provincial work. So even if we say created an additional turn lane on White Road to get out onto the number 2, unless there's additional work on the number 2, it's all for naught, ultimately. So it's a collaborative discussion.
Okay. But my point is, we can't have our cake and eat it too. We can't collaborate with the province and see what the problems would be if we're doing it one way when we now know that there's an existing problem. We now know this. I just find it difficult. We can't forget that we know this. We know there's an issue at the intersection of White Road and Highway 2. We can't pretend that we don't know this, and to me, that has to factor into any discussion with any development on this property, be it by development, by rezoning and development agreement as is presented, or be it by as of right, should this not succeed. That factor is still there, that the only intersection for these folks to get out of the subdivision, once they get on White Road, is already at overcapacity. And I think we would ignore that. Wouldn't, you know, I just think it would have to enter into the thought process somehow. So I had just picked up on that. I wasn't aware that the traffic study had indicated that this intersection is already at overcapacity. But having listened to Councillor Hebb and having heard that it is at overcapacity, that will certainly influence me in, you know, and probably at, you know, going forward, maybe there'll be more questions asked, you know, maybe it's something we have to start. If a development is entering and exiting onto a municipal road, then we need to be looking at the bigger picture as to how the municipal road gets you in and out of these subdivisions onto the main arteries. So I just make that comment. And my math, I had thought closer to 60 units difference, but you know, I guess not knowing how any 2 units would be arranged, but just refresh me, the 2 units in front, which are proposed to be 6-story, could not be 6-story, they could only be 4-story, correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the warden, they could be 15 meters, which would be 4-story of wood construction or 5-story if concrete construction.
Okay, and the unit on lot 5?
This here is in the yard,
So it
wouldn't be
couldn't
permitted.
exist?
Yeah.
It could not exist, they would have to maximize that units. And there are requirements for road frontage or?
So whenever you develop an R2 lot, you have to have road frontage, of course. So all of these, that's why I said, depending on the road layout for this area here, it would depend how many units you could get because there's.
I'm not seeing a lot of road frontage.
No, but they could build a new road. So they could build another public road. They could put an elbow in here possibly and then come down like this and come out and make a block, and then that would allow them to have more road frontage. So it's up to them if they look at the weight, the cost of building a new road versus just the extension of Lacey Ann Avenue. So what you see here doesn't mean that it's going to happen just like as you see it here. There could be a possible road that goes in and then comes down and out onto White Road, or maybe
Which
they.
takes me right back to the problem that we have with the intersection of White Road and the number 2.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the current intersection for White Road is over capacity for a non-signalized road. If you had signals put in there, then the capacity issue does go away, either whether it's through an as-of-right development or through this development. I guess my question through to John would be, or Jesse maybe, is do we have a mechanism in any of our planning documents or engineering documents prior to approval by the development officer of a site plan to charge the developer for necessary improvements to municipal infrastructure, provincial infrastructure?
To charge them? No. And I was actually, while this discussion was going on, trying to think, could we actually refuse a site plan approval? But I don't think there's anything in the land use bylaw now, based on knowing that the intersection is over capacity, that we could. I think what we could do is we could implement a local improvement charge if we wanted to do that, totally separate from the development approval process. And again, you could base that on the number of units, so obviously somebody with more units would pay more. But I can't think of any other way to hold up as of right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to remind people, we're talking about the White Estates exit, and I work in White Estates. So going in and out to the elementary school every day, I don't believe that a set of lights is going to make that whole congestion go away. It's going to control it. And also, we have to remember, we've got a new development at the top of Tyler Street that's all going to be coming out of White Estates that is being built as we speak. So that's, I'm not sure how many residents, I'm not sure what the number is up there, but it is a very big development with the potential for 2 cars at every duplex up there, and that traffic hasn't even started yet. So that's on top of the traffic that's coming out of White Estates now and has nothing to do with this proposed development. Also, just in response to the approximately 32 new units that would come from this, going from the as-of-right development to the new proposed development, basically it's 2 stories. What the residents are looking at is that as of right, it would be a 4-story development. They want a 6-story development. From a resident's point of view, that's night and day. So that's how they're looking at it, and I think that's basically how we should be looking at it. It's a huge difference for the people around there. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just for the information of our Planning Advisory Committee members, the traffic impact analysis, the Nova Scotia Public Works required the applicant to actually take into account the traffic that was going to be created from the Tyler Street extension in their analysis. So they did take that into consideration, and there's 90 dwelling units there if you're interested, and that was included in the conclusion of the traffic impact analysis. And the second part is as of right, they could do a mixed-use capable building, which would be 15 meters to allow for a 5-story if it was built of concrete. What is in the draft development agreement is 18.5 meters, so a difference of 3.5 meters as a maximum, which would allow for a 6-story building built of concrete. That's just the difference, just for clarification.
Continuing on about the traffic issue. Right now, as of right, we're gonna be adding to White Road one way or another, and from what we know, is an overcrowded intersection. Why would we ever agree to a development agreement that would create even more chaos? And, it just doesn't make any sense. And I think we would be held to our due diligence to not approve that because of this. And, to second to what Garden Cole said, lights are not gonna be the answer for here. Yes, lights do help, but you still have the congestion of backup, and traffic will move much quicker, but you still have, at times, backups and wait lines there. So, to say lights are gonna be the answer, no. They will help, yes. So, I just feel just on the traffic alone, we should be not approving this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, as of right, the building in back, the high-rise in back, that's the proposal here, that can be changed for something else, can it not?
To you, Mr. Chair, under the current zoning, it's the portion up here that could potentially have 3 apartment units. The portion in back, the R2, where that 4-story building is, would have to be developed as either single unit or 2-unit development. The road network doesn't necessarily have to follow the pattern that it currently is. And just in relation to Councillor Rhino's question here, I should also mention that there's going to be an additional, with this application, there's an additional proposed access off of Lacey Ann Avenue, that extension there, that would take some of the traffic from this development and take it out onto Trunk 2 here as well. So I don't imagine all the vehicles will be using the white road access. Some of them will be using the Lacey Ann extension. I'm not sure if there's any other further questions, Councillor Hebb.
Just for that high-rise that's in back, they could build that as of right, could they not?
This one here?
No, they couldn't. Okay. So, as of the way it is now, through the development agreement, there would be no access onto White Road from those properties, right?
Through you, Mr. Chair, right now, there's bollards here, so they couldn't have a straight cut through. They would have to access off of Lacey Ann Avenue.
No, but what I'm saying is that property now, there would be no access onto White Road for emergency purposes.
Under what's currently there, right?
Well, on the proposal here, it doesn't show any road going onto White Road except right there, and I would assume that would be I won't say a gate, but something for emergency purposes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, that's a driveway into the development.
So it is a driveway onto White Road now? Okay.
That's correct.
And as of right, as you mentioned, the properties in back, they could put their own road in and bring another road out onto White Road?
They could potentially do a variety of things. One of the options would be to bring a road out onto White Road. The other option would be to extend down to Lacey Ann Avenue, and maybe they could do a block of R2 in the back here and then come back out onto Lacey Ann.
Mm-hmm. And a comment about Lazy Ann, I mean, that if I was a resident there, I'd sooner come out to a set of lights knowing that at some point I am going to get out rather than go out to some, and try and get in front of somebody. So, I don't know. This is a tough one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hebb. Councillor Tingley.
Through the chair to staff again, I'm just a question on the lights in that intersection. if the lights are installed and Lacey Lane is extended, would it still be over capacity?
So you, Mr. Chair, I'm not a traffic engineer. I don't know if Jesse would have anything else to say about that, but I'm assuming that would meet the needs of what Public Works is required to have that intersection design, if that's what they've asked for.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Sure, through Mr. Chair. The discussion to date from my recollection with Public Works is that creating turn lanes on White Road, on the 2 at that intersection, having a one-way in, one-way out on Lacey Ann. It's just a one-way in, one-way out with a potential boulevard in the middle, so you can't cut across. So that reduces that interface. That would meet the traffic requirements of the province, according to the TAC manual, the Transportation Association of Canada's manual for traffic movement. So that is the comments that I've received or interpreted through discussions with the province. So it's those amendments will make the traffic flow smoother. Will there be less congestion? No, it's just going to be managed differently. So it'll move at a controlled and safer pace. So the movements will be controlled and managed, which they can't in today's world.
Thank you, Jesse. Still on, Councillor?
This is a bit of a tough one for me because I've only received 20 emails from people down there in that area that are not satisfied with this development proposal. And one person seemed to be providing all the others with a form letter just to send to everybody. And that person started out their letter by saying that when they initially moved from Halifax, which is more congested and dense, to here, they had a lot of apprehension about moving to the country. Now they're living out here, and we're looking at doing some development here, and it looks, for the most part, just a matter of increasing the height of this building by 1 story. There's a lot of apprehension now by this person and others about doing this development, and there seems to be a lot of fear here in council as well about making a decision because there's a whack of people out there that are against it. I'm just saying I haven't heard that kind of feedback, and I have spoken with people that live in that area, and they never responded to the questionnaire, and the people that I spoke with, and they just didn't seem to be overly concerned one way or the other about the development. You know, I'm fairly new to council here. I just took an oath, approximately a week ago, to be fair and impartial and reasonable about votes and decisions I make within council. I'm having trouble determining that it would be fair and impartial and reasonable to turn this down. But I'm going to listen to the rest of the comments and see where we go from there.
Thank you, Councillor. I can reply to that because probably the 20 people that replied are the one who live on White Road and within 300 meter of the development. And the other could be in the apartment building and behind, so it doesn't affect them probably, or they don't want to weigh on it. So just my thought. Thank you.
That could be, but I can't assume that. And the only people that I spoke to don't live in an apartment; they live in a house there. But I don't have a lot of information other than those emails, and they seem to be all triggered by one person who provided a template for these people to send an email to all the counselors. And their points are well articulated, and you know, I think they put a lot of thought into making their case. But does council make decisions based on 20 people, or you know, is that fair and impartial and reasonable? So I can only make a decision based on what is before me and what I'm hearing. And like I say, I'll listen to whatever anybody else has to say, but that's the information that's before me.
Thank you, Councillor.
And I do have
Go ahead.
And I do have a lot of trust and faith in what staff are saying, and if they're recommending it, that it would be a fair and reasonable thing. You know, my only reason to vote against it would be because I have fear that there's a small group of people that are against it.
Thank you. Warden.
Thank you. Well, I will go on record as saying I am not afraid to vote either for or against anything that comes before council. I listen to the staff reports. I read and listen to things that the public have to say. I listen to comments by other councilors. And I particularly like to listen to what the counselor representing the area's experience has been, because the counselor representing any particular area is generally the one that's going to get the most feedback. So I listen to that too. So any decision that I make will not be based on fear that I'm going to upset 20 people. It will be based on whether or not I feel the proposal is the best possible way to develop that particular property along that particular area for the folks who live in the area, who have developed the area, who have built the area into what it is today. And balancing that is also the information based on, you know, the benefit to the municipality of the development. But for me, it is always a tough decision. It's not ever easy, but I never make decisions based on fear. I'm just going on record to say that. This is a difficult one. We have had the benefits of this very clearly, I think, outlined by staff. We've seen the letters that have come in, and I don't particularly fault people for using a form letter, because I don't know how the form letter was developed. These folks could have all gotten together and tried to come up with something that they felt articulated their concerns, and all used it that way. Not everyone is comfortable putting, you know, pen to paper and articulating things. You know, it's a strength that some people have that others don't. So I don't, you know, the fact that much of the correspondence did include a form type letter doesn't make it any less valid, I guess, in my opinion. Because the people still took the time to read it, to put it down, and to send it off. So it is still an opinion. And yes, there are many people we haven't heard from. That's just the way it is. The silent majority will not be heard from on any development. It has to be something that's really, really, really off for them to come out. And it has happened while I've been here and in the rural area. I recall the time we went to the 2-level tax system, and we had public community meetings where we had to do the meeting twice because the hall was too full to let any more people crowd in there. So we had to do the presentation twice. So it does happen. So this is a difficult one. It is a hard one. I just look back over the years and the changes when I drive through the number 2 and what it looked like when I came on council almost 25 years ago and what it looks like now. And for me, the concern is, you know, and maybe we don't have to, you know, maybe it's not our problem, the overcapacity at the White Road intersection. But at some point, it is our problem, I think. And I know this development would ease that somewhat, but from what I'm understanding is that the folks, at least those we have heard from, don't think the Lacey Ann thing is enough of a carrot or an offset to having those. To me, I think the biggest problem are those 2 big apartments in the front along the number 2 for people, or that's what I'm getting out of the whole thing, that those are the biggest sticking points. And I have wondered at times if people understand that if this is not approved, that they'll still be getting apartment buildings there. But anyone who has followed this, I have to think that they do understand that they just won't be quite as big of apartment buildings. I hope this far in that there's no one out there that thinks if this were turned down, then it would just pretty much stay single and 2 unit dwellings, because, you know, that's not how it would be. So it's, it is a tough one. I have traffic concerns. And I look at Lacey Ann and I just wonder, there's the Bullard there, so, you know, a lot of the traffic in this would go out Lacey Ann, but it's only allowed to turn right when it exits Lacey Ann. So then what's going to happen? If they want to go to Elmsdale and not to Enfield, they're going to go down the number 2, and the first chance they get, they're going to have to turn around and get back on the number 2 again to go back towards Elmsdale. And I just assume that those folks, a lot of them will be going to Elmsdale to do their grocery shopping, and some of them will work there and so on. So, you know, what are they going to do? Come down and turn in White Road and try and turn around somewhere and come back out? Are they going to go on down to the next street down, or are they going to try to get into Avery's and come back out? I don't know. But to me, having that right turn exit only from Lacey Ann, it might help get you out onto the number 2 if you want to go towards Enfield. But if you want to go towards Elmsdale, I think it's just still going to cause, you know, there are other issues that are going to pop up because of that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Just to be fair to our public members, each councillor have received an email from 20 or 25 people opposed. They're just because probably you don't know what we're talking about here. We received like 20 or 25 emails from a group of people that did one letter and they send it to everybody from different emails. So, and they're all opposing to it. Just to make you put you in a picture. Thank you. Okay. Send Councilor Garden-Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In my last year of council, I've learned that people reach out in different ways that they're comfortable reaching out in, whether it be responding to a letter which is sent, you know, a mere 300 meters at times, seems like a mere 300 meters from the proposed development or whatnot, to emails, to phone calls. There's some people who only do phone calls. There's some people who you would never hear from, be it not that you didn't meet them in the grocery store, and then they are, you know, very vocal about concerns or things they're happy about. So people reach out in different ways. Some people don't reach out at all. So a lot of times I feel like it comes down to us, you know, using our common sense or the vibe that we get, or trying to put ourselves in the position, you know. It's easy for people to sit back in their subdivisions, or, you know, I'm tucked down off the road where I live and think, you know, this doesn't really apply to me. And the position that we're in, that's not a privilege that we can afford to take. We have to put ourselves in the positions. Yes, we have to decide what's good for the municipality and development, which I am absolutely in favor of, watching this municipality grow. You know, I've lived here my whole life, and so much of it is great, but it doesn't mean that it's all great. Not all development is great, or not all, you know, proposals are great. And yes, we need housing and apartments, and heaven knows Enfield has provided enough of that over the years in different parts of Enfield. We've got a huge municipality waiting for development in all different areas. And, you know, right now we're talking about a 4-story versus a 6-story building. Basically, development is what my residents are seeing. And with the traffic and with all the other components of it, I will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few comments. We've heard from some residents. I do value the councillor of the district that it's in. I do value all councillors' input. The one thing is, there's the residents of that area have a right as landowners and residents, and we have to also remember that the developer who owns that land has a right to do something with their land as well. I think, and this is my personal opinion, I haven't made a decision whether I'm for or against this yet, but in my mind, for fairness, we need to give both sides the ability to speak to us directly, to council, in the public hearing. I believe there should be at a public hearing, and that the residents should have the ability to hear directly from the developer, and the developer can hear directly from the residents. And then us as council, as we all know, it's our decision to make the decision at the end. But that public hearing, I think, might help alleviate and answer some of the questions that we've had here today, or might amplify some of the comments and some of the other things that were brought into view today by councillors and through questions to staff, that might make the decision for some people who are still unsure, as myself, which way I think they should go. So for that, I'm going to move the recommended motion to bring this to public hearing. I don't have the motion in front of me, whatever it is, but I will move the motion to at least bring it to a public hearing, so we will have the all parties be able to give us a better view.
Any seconder?
Just to clarify.
Oh, okay.
Just to clarify, Mr. Chair, so the motion before you is a recommendation from PAC that will be presented at the public hearing. So council's already authorized a public hearing.
Okay.
So the recommended motion from staff is that PAC recommend approval, just to clear that.
Okay, so the public hearing is going to happen regardless of approval. Okay. Then I don't need to make this motion then.
Okay.
I withdraw.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, CAO.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarification, because the 4 stories versus 6 stories comment has been made a couple of times. The current, as of right, if built by concrete, would be a 5-story allowance for the buildings in the front?
If it was built as a mixed-use capable building, it could be a maximum of 42 units per building and a maximum height of 15 meters if constructed out of concrete would allow for a 5-story building.
Right, so as concrete, it would be 5 stories versus 6 stories in the development agreement.
Yeah, and the height difference in the end, it's 3.5 meters is the difference in height, if anybody's interested.
And for clarification, the 6-story have to be concrete.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in order to meet that height requirement, yeah, it would have to be concrete. And I talked to the applicant, and they said pretty much any building built of that's 6 stories would be built out of concrete.
Yeah, but if it's not concrete and they go with the pitch roof, it's gonna be way higher.
Oh, yes, yeah, so they have
So
to,
it must be by concrete
yeah.
in the development agreement.
Well, it doesn't say it have to be, but if they have to meet, if they want to meet the height, maximum height, that 18.5 meters, it would have to be built of
Okay,
concrete.
thank you. All right, Councilor Rhino.
You just want to clarify that. I'm not sure everybody understands that this is not council. This is the executive committee. The executive committee, or the planning committee will be making a recommendation to either accept or reject this. It's still going to a public hearing, right? And it's that we make a decision upon that time. We can still make a recommendation, we don't believe in this, and that will be presented to council, just so everyone is clear on this, how this is going. So, you know, we may make a recommendation today, we don't recommend this, it will still proceed to council, and at that report, the executive committee recommends we don't do this, or we do this, then the council makes that decision. So I just want to clarify that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Warden.
Yeah, thank you. Back to the 4 or 5-story thing. If in the zoning that's there now, which is mixed use, could they put buildings there that didn't have mixed use on the bottom?
That's correct. They just have to be designed so they're mixed use capable. So that means that they have to be designed with taller heights at the ground floor level, and so that it could be converted to commercial at some other point.
So is there any allowance, should the developer not want to do that? Could they just put apartment buildings there without any commercial of?
Yes.
And how many stories would those be?
It's 15 meters, which would be equivalent to either 4 stories out of wood construction or 5 stories of concrete construction.
Without the mixed use?
Yeah, without mixed use. All it has to do is be mixed use capable buildings. That's what we have it defined as land use
So my
bylaw.
question was, should the developer not want to make the building mixed use capable? What is the allowance?
Okay, if it's just a multiplex, a large multiplex, then it's 24 units per building and a maximum height of 12.2 meters.
Okay, so they would almost certainly, it would be worth their money to invest in the mixed use. Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Okay. The screen is clear, so. Anybody willing to move a recommendation? Councilor Rhino.
I move that we recommend to council that council does not support the zoning request in this.
Any seconder? Move in second, any discussion? See none, going to the vote. There's one. Somebody didn't vote? 6. And the motion passed 7-4. Individual result. Councilor Knockwood, Tingley, Perry, and Mitchell vote in nay. You guys want to take a break, or you want to keep going? Oh no, we have public members. Keep going, I guess. Do we have a second? Is that?
So given that this motion recommends that council refuse the rezoning, so there was a second motion there concerning a development agreement, so that would not be made at this time, correct?
Through you,
We're going forward to public hearing, I'm just a little confused at the process.
The motion would be that you recommend that the application's refused, period, because you can't have the development agreement if you don't have the
Okay, thank
redesignation
you.
rezoning.
So then we move on to the next item.
Okay, our next item is River Country State Subdivision Limited Development Agreement for Self-Storage. Rachel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the application is from River Country Estates Subdivision Limited, and it's to enter into a development agreement to enable a multi-structure self-storage facility, and it's on the corner of Highway 214 and Highway 14 in 9 Mile River. So you can see on the aerial photography there that the subject site is outlined in red, and it's approximately 12,025 meters squared, approximately 200 meters of frontage on Highway 214, and 158 meters of frontage on Highway 14. The zoning is highway commercial, and you can see from the zoning map there is another highway commercial property opposite. And then the rest of the properties surrounding are R2, which is single 2 dwelling unit zone. So the site plan here shows what the developer is proposing, and it's a total of 6 buildings. PAC may remember that originally the application actually included 10 buildings. There was 1 here, 2 here, and then 1 here. So the site plan has been changed since the original submission. The proposed buildings have a combined footprint of 1,894 square meters, and the driveway for the proposal would be on Highway 214. You can see the location of the driveway here, and there is an emergency exit driveway just located on Highway 14 there. So this shows a typical elevation for the proposed buildings. So policy ED23 is the policy that allows self-storage warehousing to be considered by development agreement in the highway commercial zone. And the policies there, IM 26, 27, and 28, are the policies that need to be reviewed through when looking at a development agreement application. So staff reached out to Nova Scotia Public Works, the RCMP, and the Volunteer Fire Department, and no concerns were raised by any of those organizations. Staff have worked with the applicant to address the zone requirements for the highway commercial zone. So since the initial submission, the building has been reduced from 10 to 6. The setbacks for the buildings have been increased from the original proposal to over 12 meters along Highway 214, and then they also increased the property boundary setbacks with the adjacent residential properties. Vegetation has been added to the site plan for the property boundary adjacent to the residential properties, and the property will be screened from Highway 214 and 14 with a berm, and also the applicant is requesting that chain link fencing be allowed on top of the berm for security purposes. The proposal does not comply with the maximum commercial floor area in the highway commercial zone. However, under policies that enable council to consider the development agreement, council can look at the floor area and vary those floor area requirements. Policy IM 28D of the Municipal Planning Strategy, that's the policy that allows land use bylaw requirements to be varied through the development agreement process. So on that particular aspect, the size of the property is over 3 times the required minimum lot size for an unserviced lot. And then when staff did the ratio of building to property, It is less than what would be allowed as of right. I do have those measurements, actually. I'll just give you those quickly. Excuse me for a second. So as of right development, if you look at the minimum size lot and then the commercial floor area that would be allowed, it's 25% of the lot can be developed with buildings. This application, with the size of the lot and the size of the buildings, is actually, it will be 15.7% of the lot developed. So that's quite a bit less than what would be as of right. So planning staff were concerned with the layout of the site as previously proposed and whether larger vehicles could move around the site effectively. In particular, staff were concerned with how close the buildings were located to property boundaries. So the applicant prepared a truck turning plan for the site. And you can see here, it shows the applicant looked at a 10-meter length truck. And just so you can kind of visualize the size of that truck, I've included a copy of it here in the presentation. And the truck turning information demonstrated that in some locations there wasn't enough room for vehicles to move around, allowing for boundary screening. And based on comments from staff and that truck turning plan, the applicant removed some of the buildings from the proposal. And I'll show you where those are right now. So the buildings that were adjacent to Highway 14 have been removed because the truck turning information demonstrated some issues there. So 56 questionnaires were mailed to property owners within 300 meters of the application site and 10 were returned. There were 7 that were supportive or neutral and the remaining 3 had concerns or raised questions. And those were scanned for Planning Advisory Committee to review. And a letter confirming the public hearing has been mailed to property owners. And just a note there that this is also scheduled for next week. It's the same public hearing as the WM Fairs application. So that's also been scheduled for the same night. So comments on the return questionnaires. These are all included in the staff report, but they, along with some comments provided by staff, but the comments were, will this affect my property taxes and value? Is a higher volume of traffic in the area expected? Will the site be secured? Concerns about this proposal being an eyesore for the area, concern about precedent for other industrial buildings, and these facilities are accessible 24 hours a day, and concern about safety for children and pedestrians due to an increase in traffic. Staff reviewed all of these comments and have no concerns resulting from these comments, and those justifications are provided again in the staff report. So staff have completed the review of the application. The site plan was amended to address concerns from staff, and we're recommending approval of the proposal. And then just a chart there to show that we're at the stage where next week the public hearing has been scheduled. Planning Advisory Committee recommend that Council give final consideration and approve the application. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We have Warden.
Well, just a question through you, Mr. Chair, to Vice Chair to Council. The same concern with the restrictions of people able to attend a public hearing next week, given the new restrictions announced yesterday. And a question, we don't know, but there are going to be a large amount of people want to come to a public hearing about this, but then again, we don't know that there aren't. And I just would like Council to consider whether or not we want to postpone this public hearing at least until January to allow us, for the same reasons as before, to allow us to advertise and make people aware, and also give us the ability, if we had to do it, to go to a virtual public hearing. I don't know what people's thoughts are on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Councillor Hatt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. approximately, I think it was about 8 people have reached out to me, and more of an information process more than anything else. And, you know, we've read the comments from the questionnaires, and these 8 people basically didn't understand what was going there and what the impact and all that. But they were all in agreement. They think this is a great thing that for this community, for this piece of land. It's something that's unique to the rural part of the area, and they feel it's going to be an asset to this community. And they don't feel there's any traffic impact that's going to be there because it's going to be. And as far as the 24 hours, you know, it's going to be open, but how many people are going to actually use it will be very questionable. And I don't think if we go to a public hearing, you're going to have many people here. I think we could accommodate that just because of the feedback that I have. And, you know, I think this would be a chance for us to have that public hearing and move on for it so the developer can either decide, you know, what the answer is going to be. So at this time, I'll move the recommendation as presented.
Thank you, Councillor. Any seconder? Move and seconded. Councillor Reiner, you were on before the discussion.
Just, I apologize to staff if this has been mentioned, but if this, this motion passes, how, if they wanted to add, if they're very successful in their storage and they wanted to add more units, would that be done through a development agreement? They'd have to come back through here again. Could you walk me through that process?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, if the applicant wanted to add any additional buildings, they would have to have a substantial change to the development agreement, which is essentially the same process that we're going through now. So we would, you know, notify people in the area, consult with our consultees, and there would be a public hearing.
So, but they're not, there is the possibility to increase on that if they go through the proper channels.
Yes, there is.
Well, I really do think that this is probably much needed, and we're gonna see a greater demand for storage unit in the future, just because of the as of rights, as you know, we talked about today. Storage is in demand, and I expect to see more of these applications in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I see no one left. Question being called. Go to the vote. And it passed unanimously. Our next item is land secondary planning strategy. Rachel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as part of the 2016 Official Community Plan, Council approved policy GM25, and that requires a planning document to be developed for the Hants Growth Reserve area prior to the subject lands being developed. And also did a note there that this secondary planning strategy was identified in the Council Strategic Plan as an example of a future initiative. A staff report requesting approval for the land secondary planning strategy was previously presented in December 2017, but at that time, there had been no official announcement from the provincial government on the interchange location. And council decided not to pursue the project, but did stipulate that developers be informed that proposals for the developments in this area not be entertained until a secondary planning strategy is completed at a further date. So since 2017, December, the new Hants interchange will be completed by the end of this year. Many land parcels, large parcels of land in the serviced area are under development or proposed for development. Staff anticipate there being pressure from developers wanting to develop land in the Hants GRA, and the study area is proposed to be extended further than the boundary for the proposed study area. So there's a map that will show this increase, and the reason that we're suggesting this is to allow the linking through to Garden Road and potentially links through to the Garden Meadows subdivision. There are approximately 905 acres in the proposed study area, and we've estimated that around 100 acres are identified as wetlands. Land owners within the study area have not yet been contacted about this study, But that will be, if approval is given to this, that will be an element of the actual, the secondary plan strategy development. So you can see here on the map that we have, the zoning map, you can see this outline in red. This is the boundary of the current Lands Growth Reserve area, and we're proposing that this be extended up to here, Garden Road, and the edge of this subdivision here. Oh, and just to point out as well, this is the location of the new Lance interchange just here, and as I noted that that is almost complete. And then this is the Clayton Developments land, and this is the Armco land just down here. So staff suggests that the work be done in 2 phases. The first phase will identify the constraints of the study area, and the second will complete the remainder of the work. So the reason for this is if the first phase identifies that there are significant barriers to development, then the second phase may not be undertaken. So I reached out to staff in the I&O department, the Parks and Rec department, and economic and business development staff, just to kind of get some understanding of what their needs would be. One of the first things we would do is a secondary plan strategy boundary delineation, wetland delineation, and geology and topography, including karst geology, which is potential for sinkholes. So all of these will help to identify the actual boundary of the study area. I&O needs critical road, bike and pedestrian connections, wastewater servicing, water requirements, water tower assessment, and stormwater management. Parks, Rec and Culture needs assessment, active transportation network and river access, economic and business development, a market outlook for both residential and commercial, economic and social infrastructure development, so identifying whether there's a need for kind of any healthcare services, if there's a need for an enlarged library, and where are those kinds of uses might be located, commercial and light industrial land use, inclusive transit and active transportation, so how do we move people through the actual area, and green economies, and planning and development needs assessment, development pattern and zoning, design of the land, landowner and community engagement, and then the final document. And there is a bit more of a discussion about each individual points in the staff report if Planning Advisory Committee want some more information on that. There is a large amount of technical work that will need to be completed, and I looked on the Nova Scotia tender website just to kind of get an idea of if there are any other similar projects around the province which have been awarded by other municipal units, and I only identified one, which was done by the Municipality of Kings County, and the tender details said that the project management and land use planning services for New Miner's secondary planning strategy, and the tender award was just under $130,000. In addition to this, I reached out to a consultant just to get a very rough estimate costing for such a study, and the consultant estimated a minimum of $115,000 and maybe as high as $165,000. So based on these 2 pieces of information, staff are recommending $130,000 be included in the 2022 and 23 draft budget for the completion of the study. So there is an alternative option, and there is a significant number of residential units which have recently received approval or are proposed for the serviced area of Enfield, Elmsdale and Lance. This will supply the market with residential development for several years. Some highway commercial land is also planned for the Clayton Developments land, and based on these, council may consider that they're not ready to pursue moving forward with the Lance secondary planning strategy due to the significant supply of housing. If council decides not to proceed at this time, staff recommend that developers be informed that proposals for development of the Lance GRA not be entertained until a secondary planning strategy is completed at a future date. So although staff have provided this alternative option, staff are recommending that we move forward with the secondary planning strategy at this point in time. So their recommendation is to include the funds in the budget for this strategy to be completed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We have the warden.
Through you to staff, so should we decide to do this study, that does not commit us to implementing.
That's correct, yeah. So the study will really provide like a roadmap for how this land could be developed or should be developed. It doesn't provide any requirements on us to do that. It'll allow us to understand how that land should be developed and what infrastructure we might need to provide when that land does get developed.
Okay. And the last time I remember this coming forward, we did exactly what the alternate motion said.
That's right.
Because we didn't feel we were there yet. The one thing that concerns me a little bit is that we have not had any interaction or correspondence with the folks that own this land to even say, we're thinking about doing a study on your land and making things different than they are now. And that concerns me. I would, you know, if we spend $130,000 or more on a study, and if we have landowners who are perhaps, and maybe they're all on board, I don't know, because we haven't asked them. If we have one or two, we're talking about 900 plus acres here. And if we have landowners that say, I don't care what your study says, I don't want my land zoned this way or developed this way. Like, I don't know, it's hard, you know, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, I guess. And I don't object to doing a study. I'd be more comfortable if we had some conversation with the landowners that indicated to me that they thought the study was a good idea too. Thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Yep.
If I could just mention that I have spoken to at least one of the landowners, one of the major landowners in this area, and they are aware of this study going ahead. And I think actually they're quite keen for this to move forward. We haven't had any discussions with any of the other landowners, but this study doesn't commit them to developing their lands. And also an important aspect of the secondary planning strategy will be for the consultant to have those conversations with those landowners and to kind of get that discussion started on what they feel makes sense for their land. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and like I said, I'm not objecting. I'm probably going to support the recommended motion. But it does concern me, and the fact that perhaps we have had discussions with one of the large landowners, but not the others, concerns me because, you know, people could take some offense, for lack of a better word, to that, you know, you talked to my neighbor to see what he thought about it, but you didn't bother to ask me type thing. So that's just my only concern, and I understand it is, you know, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, and they will be consulted, and I guess those are my only comments. Thank you. And where would this funding come from?
I don't know if the CAO can answer that question.
Through you, Madam Chair, there's professional services set aside. We did at one point have some set aside for planning initiatives as well. We have a professional services reserve that this type of study would come from. And I would also say from an engagement perspective, I think the conversation that Rachel's referring to was more of a, this has gone in front of council in the past, and staff will be bringing forward a recommendation to do this study in the future, not dependent on whether they wanted it or not. We as staff, we would never start to go out and talk to a massive amount of landowners or a number of landowners prior to getting council's approval to start doing something. So it is a chicken and an egg. Part of this study would be that engagement with those landowners, making sure that they were fully involved in that process. So thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Councilor Rhino.
So if I could clarify, so this recommended motion would be to put it in the draft budget, and then at that time, we could either accept or reject it at that time. This does not guarantee that this project would be going forth. Am I correct in that?
That's correct, yes. This is just, council can still decide at the budget time not to move forward with this.
And my second question, I guess the warden kind of asked that, is where would this money be coming from, professional services? I guess I'm not opposed to putting it in the budget rate just now, but that's no guarantee I'll support it when we start to go through the budget process, because I really do think that with the increases we are trying to get in the police sector, that will weigh heavily on what the budget will allow for rate increases or whatever. So I'm not opposed to putting it in there, but I'm not really sold on the fact that the benefit are right now are sticking right out at me. So I'd be willing to listen to see further on that, but that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. I see no one else. What's your wish? Moved by the, okay. Move and second. Any discussion?
Question?
Question being called. We go to the vote. And the motion is passed unanimously. Our last item for the planning is plan update, community engagement summary report, phase 1. Debbie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a plan update community survey was undertaken from July to September 1st, and plan update open houses were held in October. Results of both the engagement formats have been summarized in staff's report, and results will be used to help guide the development of land use planning policies and regulations in the future planned area and to assist in reviewing existing policies and regulations. Further community engagement will take place once the first draft of the East Hants official community plan is ready for review. So we'll start here at overall, how satisfied are you with East Hants as a place to live? And I should say that there were 431 people responded to the survey, and of those 431 people, there were 1,841 written comments associated with those 431 people. So yes, first question, overall, how satisfied are you with East Hants as a place to live? And we broke it down into all of East Hants, the future planned area, and the South Corridor commercial growth management area. And I was hoping to pull out Mount Uniacke and Lakeland separately as well, but unfortunately, they just didn't have the number of people to warrant its own kind of category. It's just not enough people responded from that area to the survey. No matter where respondents live, they felt similar about living in East Hants. It is interesting because the South Corridor commercial growth quarter is undergoing change, and really there was only a 1% difference between the three categories or three places. So for overall, satisfied or somewhat satisfied was 89%, dissatisfied or somewhat dissatisfied was 11%. Next question is, in planning for the future of your community, how strongly should East Hants residents regulate land use in the following areas? So overall, residents felt that environmental preservation should have the strongest regulations, closely followed by farmland protection and shoreline preservation. And the only place that changed is in the future planned area, where residents felt that farmland preservation should have the strongest regulations. You could achieve those goals by including setbacks from watercourses, agricultural zoning, and the prevention and removal of soil next to the shoreline. Next question, what are the most important factors for you to see reflected in the official community plan? And these were ranked. And again, for all of East Hants overall, the most important factor that East Hants residents wanted to see reflected in their official community plan was policies and regulations regarding infrastructure and transportation. And in the future planned area, residents wanted to see policies and regulations regarding preservation of agricultural land. So that was the most important one to them. And then in all three categories, the second one was growth management. It was the second one that they wanted to see regulations and policies reflected in the plan. Question 6, do you think that growth in East Hants is happening in the areas in the appropriate areas? So if you look at the results for all of East Hants, they're nearly evenly split. More residents from the future planned area were indifferent. So if you look down here, the future planned area, more of them neither agree nor disagree with where growth is occurring. And more residents in the growth management area, and that would be Enfield, Elmsdale, and Lance, just to give you some parameters, were neutral compared to the number who disagreed. So, but overall, if you look, there's still more people, that were neutral or disagreed or agreed than there was disagreed. Next question, is the development of parks, open spaces important to you? If yes, please describe the types of parks you would like to see developed. Respondents to the survey overwhelmingly indicated that the development of parks and open spaces was important to them. Family-oriented parks that encompass a wide variety of uses was the most common response. Parks which have walking trails, picnic areas, water access, and parks that are accessible to all ages and that are pet-friendly and allow for biking. And the 2 parks that were mentioned quite often, actually there's 3 parks, Shuby in Dartmouth, Shuby Park in Dartmouth, Point Pleasant Park in Halifax, that's the picture here, and then Victoria Park in Truro. 2 other park types that were mentioned often were off-leash dog parks and more playgrounds for kids. Many respondents indicated that they want these parks located in their neighborhoods for easy access. Next question was, is there anything special about your community that we should know about as we prepare the plan? East Hants residents identified many different aspects of the communities that they felt staff and council should be aware of. 2 of the most mentioned items was East Hants waterways and our rural community small town feel. Comments regarding rural community small town feel was often followed by a statement indicating that too many people were moving to East Hants from the city and they were worried that the small town feel was going to disappear, or that the corridor was turning into Sackville. And there's actually 66 comments related to Sackville, and they were all negative in nature. Other special aspects that were often mentioned was the beautiful farmlands, close-knit community, and our heritage. And the boat building in Maitland was mentioned a few times as well. There were over 35 respondents who felt that there was nothing special about the community and that they would like to have staff to know about. And this is just a picture from Upper Mile River there. Has there been any recent development? Is it? Okay, there you go. Has there been any recent development in your community that you're concerned about? Where residents live in East Hants really seem to influence how they responded to this question. Issues with the number and height of apartment buildings, new housing, and increased density were concerns mentioned frequently. This makes sense considering that over half the respondents to the survey were from the South Quarter Growth Management area, and again, that's the Enfield, Elmsdale, and Lance area, which has seen the most development and changes to the community. There was also a fair number of respondents outside of the growth management area who felt that there was a lack of development in the community. Milford, Shubenacadie, Mountain Uniacke, they're all comments related to that from those from folks in those areas. Affordable housing was also identified as an issue, with many respondents indicating that new housing was unaffordable, and affordable housing was mentioned throughout the survey quite often. A large portion of residents also had concerns with how new development impacted traffic and road infrastructure, as an example, traffic congestion and required road improvements kind of disturbing their daily lives. And this is that apartment building that's being constructed in Lance, and that's just a view from the top floor from one of our building inspectors. What is your long-term vision for the municipality of East Hants? So respondents' long-term vision for East Hants was very diverse. Many different themes were identified in the comments from residents. Some of the more repeated themes included the need for a public transit system that connects into Halifax's system, the need for more affordable housing, more community events, more parks and open spaces, growth in the number of businesses and in the number of amenities provided by the municipality, to have a mix of housing with commercial development included with that mix, to protect the environment, rivers and farmland, to have family-focused living, to keep the small town feel, to have more doctors and a full medical clinic, better designed buildings and more pleasant infrastructure, keep development in Enfield, Elmsdale and Lance, and keep the development in Enfield, Elmsdale and Lance, and keep agricultural land for food production, and to spread growth out. And I didn't capture everything here. As I said, it was very diverse, and I'd be here all day. going through all of them. Based on the review of the comments, staff cannot underline one common theme that would unite all the visions. No one vision would satisfy the majority of respondents. So the community open houses. So 5 open houses were held. As part of the open houses, attendees were asked to provide their comments on what they heard or concerns that they had. All comments have been included with the report, so we do have those in the staff report. In general, many of the residents who attended the open houses don't want land use regulations. They don't want to be told what they can do with their land. However, there was a general consensus on a number of items that could be regulated. Shoreline erosion and flooding were identified as concerns, and residents agreed that there should be setbacks from the shoreline. And there's actually a fair amount of residents who actually told us stories about their shoreline properties and how it was eroding. I know there was one farmer who said that he put up a fence one day and he was out for a couple days, and next time he went back, the fence was over the side of the cliff. So there were stories like that. The development of campgrounds and RVs was also noted as concern by a number of residents at the open houses, and that was especially in particular to Maitland. Residents had a mixed response to agriculture and the limited amount of Class 2 soils. Many agreed that the soils should be protected for future generations and not used for cottage development or similar developments, while those in the farming community did not want regulations on their lands in general. In general, residents in the future planned area who attended the open houses only want limited land use regulations, and they don't want the regulations to impact what they can do on their lands, but they see the value of land use regulations potentially benefiting the greater community. They want it to limit land uses that could create a nuisance to them, so things that could cause issue for the greater area. There most likely will be no consensus on the implementation of new land use policies and regulations from residents, and instead, the approach should be to create land use regulations that benefit the greater good. So in conclusion, residents of the results of the Plan Update Community Survey and of the Plan Update Open Houses showed that the residents, where a resident resides, tend to impact how they feel about development and land use. Residents in rural East Hants want to be allowed to do a variety of land uses on their property and want their communities to stay rural in nature. Any land use restrictions they would like to see put in place would be for land uses that would be obnoxious, for example, noise, emissions, smell, dust, to neighboring residents in the larger community. Those who responded to the survey also want in general protection of agricultural land and shoreline regulations. Based on the comments from the survey, residents in Mount Uniacke, Lakelands, Milford, and Shubenacadie areas kind of feel left out. Respondents want to see some of the growth and amenities that the South Quarter and Commercial Growth Management area has seen. They also love their communities for what they offer the residents. And agricultural land and farmland beauty in Milford and Shubenacadie was mentioned often, and hiking trails and lakes in Mount Uniacke and Lakelands was mentioned often. Of course, access to some of the lakes in Mount Uniacke was also mentioned. And this here is Piggott Lake in Mount Uniacke. Conclusion, so respondents from the South Quarter Commercial Growth Management area have provided an overwhelming mix of responses to the survey, making it difficult to identify one main theme from the survey results, other than respondents consistently indicating that housing was unaffordable and they don't want their community to turn into Sackville. Growth and development were viewed through different parameters depending on the residents' personal experiences. The best way to sum up the responses from residents of the South Quarter Commercial Growth Management area is that the area is experiencing growing pains. It is an area that is undergoing growth and change, which is impacting the daily lives of many residents. Some residents are looking forward to this growth and the amenities that accompany growth, while other residents feel that Enfield, Elmsdale, and Lance have lost their rural and small town feel. So in other words, there's many residents that wanted more shopping and more access to medical services and such, and while other residents were mourning the loss of that rural small town feel. Comments from the survey results show that growth is challenging. And that's it. There's no recommendation associated with the report.
Thank you, Debbie. We have the warden.
It's just asked for an opportunity to speak before we adjourn from PAC. And suggest to council, we do have folks in the gallery who are scheduled to speak at corporate and residential services, and we are somewhat over our time on the agenda. So I was just going to suggest that we move from PAC into corporate and residential, and then go to infrastructure and parks following that. And also to ask council if they want to consider a lunch break. We probably have between an hour and a half left to get through the agenda, whether you want to break for lunch and come back and finish it, or whether you would prefer to push on and finish the agenda. I just want it before we adjourn to get some feedback on that. So firstly, maybe just a show of, well, I guess, I don't know, show of hands and agreement. Is there agreement to move corporate and residential services to the next item on the agenda? Okay, so that we will do. And the second question may be a little tougher. Do you want to adjourn for a lunch break or continue on? And I'll let you deal with that one, Mr. Chair.
Okay. What your wish?
Sandra's got. There are a couple of people who wanted to speak.
Okay.
Just a break for 15 minutes?
Councilor Reiner.
Yeah, as stated before, when people make this agenda up, I really don't know. Like, I knew we weren't gonna get out of here by then, and I really thought that one item should have been taken under consideration to be much longer than what the time was allotted for. As I stated here before, and it's only personal, I cannot eat breakfast, and I depend on lunch as one of my main meals. And so I would be in favor of taking a lunch break at that time. Thank you.
So we'll go for lunch?
You don't know yet.
Show of hand? I guess we're going for lunch. Okay. After, yeah, after. Okay, I see nobody want to ask any question, Debbie, you're free. Motion to move from planning, out of planning. Second, move in second, all in favor? Okay. Do we still have to clean? Do we still have to clean?
I take it back.
No, we're going to corporate.
Counselors, Counselors, we are not on break. We are going into corporate and residential services, after which we will break for lunch. So I would ask folks to return to your seat. Also, we do have the Laker coming for our Christmas greetings at lunchtime. So I would suggest before we leave for lunch, it shouldn't take very long to do that little greeting. So we will wait and do that, and then we'll go to lunch if that's okay. So who are we missing? 1, 2, 3.
Yes, going for a break.
Well, no, due respect, Chair, we didn't have a break all morning, so.
But we didn't move a break, that's my point. There was no agreement to go for a break. If we want to have a break, that's fine. We do have people, we have folks here who have been waiting a while for their presentation.
I think you went for a snack.
All right, I'm going to bring the Corporate Residential Service Committee call to order. Looking for the approval of the minutes of November 16th, 2021. So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. First up, we have the presentation from East Hants Community Learning Association. I'd like to thank you guys for coming in today, and thank you for your patience as we were running a little bit late. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having us here today. My name is Tanya Burke, and I'm the Executive Director of East Hants Community Learning Association. Under our Learning Association, we operate 3 separate services: our Learning Association, a community garden, and a community rider rural transportation service. That's what we're here to talk to you about today. And we're here to provide you with an informal session about who we are, what we do, and why we think we're important. So our presentation is titled Driving Our Community Forward. So who are we? We are a community transportation organization. We are one of 20 in the province. 2 new have just come on, one in Guysborough area and one in Escazone, although you won't find a ton of information about it. It's literally just launching. So we've gone from 18 to 20 services in the province of Nova Scotia just in the last few months. East Hants Community Learning Association and Community Rider is a charitable not-for-profit service, and we do depend on government funding, the majority provincially. Our learning service, our rider service, and our community garden service are all funded under completely different funding streams. Our rider service also depends on some municipal funding through the Municipality of East Hants and Halifax Transit. We also are subsidized by grants and other supports. A provincial fare assistance program has helped us offset people's transportation costs directly. A medical transportation fund, a one-time donation we received from a golf fundraising tournament, and vaccine subsidy to help anybody go get their vaccine for $5. That's also a provincially provided subsidy. We were founded in 2006 to help people get to classes, help people get to education. We had this great service that could provide people classes, except that we're a big area and it was really difficult for people to get there. And the service expanded from there. There's lots of reasons why people need to move places. We are also a member of the Rural Transportation Association. You can look us up at www.ruralrides.ca, and you'll find information about all of the other services who do the same thing we do in the province. Each one of us are different. We all run our services differently, but we all operate for the same purpose: to move people where they need to go, to get them to their appointments, to make sure they have access to food and medicines, and to be social and engaged in their communities. So, where do we serve? We are bound by our service area. So our defined boundaries are all of East Hants, as well as the HRM communities that border East Hants through Enfield to Waverley. This expansion into some HRM communities has only happened since 2018, and unfortunately, because of COVID, our statistics are a bit up and down, shall we say. And even though we do receive funding, which allows us to operate, transportation is a subsidized entity, and we are required to charge our clients or our riders a fee. We have not changed our fees since 2014, and currently our fees are 70 cents per kilometer. If there's a long distance to travel to pick somebody up or to drop them off and go back for them later, we do 40 cents a kilometer for what we call deadhead kilometers, $12.50 for our wait time if a driver is required to wait in a parking lot for a passenger, and parking and bridge fees are also returned to the client. So, it's not free. We know this. Why do we exist? Our passengers are the reason for our service. We're here to help anybody that needs access to transportation. You don't just require living in a wheelchair. You don't just require living in a rural area. You don't just require being elderly. Lots of people use our service to go lots and lots of places. Sometimes I'm at work late and my 6-year-old needs to be picked up at childcare. We book a rider. For many people, we're the only option to get where they need to go. And some of the reasons as your only option are cost. Even though there is a cost to us, it's still less expensive than a taxi. Friends or family are not available or able to take you where you need to go anymore. Your disability has left you unable to drive anymore. Or your health is just not well enough to get you where you need to go. We recognize that with our resources, we cannot help everybody, but we do work to help as many people as we can. All right, now for the fun part. How do we pay for everything? So I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we do depend on funding to help us do what we do. The numbers I'm providing you today are specific to the rider service because frankly, that's what we're here to talk about. And these numbers are reflective of last year, which is a COVID year. So I won't dwell on that too much. We were successful last year in attaching ourselves to some of the federal subsidies that were available to help businesses who had lost significant amounts of revenue because of the COVID pandemic. That we fell under that. Our main funder is our Provincial Community Transportation Assistance Program at $105,000 a year. Our passenger fares went down considerably because, frankly, we weren't driving very far, down to $69,000. Municipality of East Hants, $15,000. Halifax Transit, $14,600, and additional revenues, including donations of $46,800. That's a particularly high year and was a result of an influx of cash to help us buy a vehicle. So total revenues for last year for our rider service were about $370,000, just shy of $371,000. Our expenses, however, $136,500 in driver salaries, office salaries and benefits, $67,000 in vehicle expenses. We had 2 major vehicle repairs last year. Vehicle amortization and acquisition, $62,000. Office and administrative costs and rent, $369,000. So the community rider service is certainly operating on a cost recovery model. So what do we need to succeed? Funding. The more funding our service receives, the more we're able to meet the needs of our community. Currently, we are undergoing a business plan review. It is part of our CTAP funding requirement. We have to do it every 5 years, whether we like it or not. It will recommend a rate increase. We have not raised our rates since 2014. However, we do recognize cost as a barrier for using the service, and many passengers still struggle with our costs. So raising our rates typically means a passenger just can go less far. Also, increasing rates may address rising costs, but it doesn't allow us to grow. With additional funding or additional resources, we could have more drivers driving more hours in a week and serving more passengers. We can look at driver compensation and look at a living wage. We can look at recruiting and retaining drivers, which is one of our biggest challenges right now. And we can address fleet management, replacement, and acquisition. Second biggest challenge for the rider service right now. We can also promote the service and reach new passengers, which we are seeing. One of the interesting things that have come from COVID is even though we have delivered basically half the amount of kilometers of service in that COVID year, we've actually gained new clients and we're going to new communities. We see ourselves more in Knoll and Kennecook than we have in the past. And we have just recently recruited a driver from the Middle Sackville area, which will help us serve Mount Uniacke better than we have been. Next slide. So, again, we have, and we're grateful for every dollar that we receive. We make a dollar stretch as far as it possibly can. But we did feel that this was a good time to highlight that we do receive funding from 2 municipalities. We receive funding from HRM through the Rural Transit Funding Program at a base of $10,000 a year plus 50 cents a kilometer for every kilometer of service we drive in that HRM service area. And from the Municipality of East Hants, we receive $15,000 that directly supports the community rider service. Our little chart below is a bit of a breakdown in the past 3 years, 2021, 2022 only being the first half of the year because that's where we are right now, to demonstrate the amount of service we deliver in each municipality. So in 2019-20, when we were at our highest level of service delivery in our HRM service area, we were still only at 19.2% of our total service delivery, meaning that 80.8% of all of our service delivery is in East Hants. 2020, 2021, not a stellar year for anyone, 4.2 to 7.7% in the HRM service delivery area, 92.3 to 95.8% in Municipality of East Hants. And for the first half of this fiscal year, we went from 6% quarter 1 to 11.3, which is nearly double in the second quarter of the year. And in Municipality of East Hants, 94% of the service delivery down to 88.7 in the second quarter of this fiscal year. Thanks, Phil. How can you help? There are many ways that you can help our community rider service be successful and meet the needs of as many passengers as we can manage. Fundraisers and donations are hugely important to us. Participate when you can. Fundraising dollars and donations assist us to subsidize transportation directly for those who are financially barriered and who are not supported by a funding agency. You can book a ride with us. Maybe you have a family you'd like to drive around to see Christmas lights. Maybe there is a child in your life that needs pickup at childcare. You can be an ambassador for us. You can talk about our service. You can tell people if you think we're doing great things. And our final ask, as I'm cognizant of the time that we are given to present here today, when you're considering your budget for funding for our service for the next fiscal year, please consider providing us with a base rate plus a funding per kilometer traveled in a similar fashion to HRM Transit's program, or a comparable level of funding to HRM-based service in the area of $50,000. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that I can here today.
Thank you, Tanya. First up is the warden.
Thank you. And I know we're all extremely appreciative of the service that you do provide. A question first, just curiosity, having never used the service, but should there be, a group, let's say 2 or 3 folk from one community who want to book a ride to come to Elmsdale, get the groceries and come home, that is not 70 cents a kilometer each, that's just 70 cents a kilometer for the trip?
That most likely, yes. It depends on who your group is, how big it is. Do we have to travel to multiple places to pick up your group? Are you booking a group ride to Elmsdale where we can book you a group rate? If you are 5 individuals who are independently booking individual rides, then you would be counted as an individual
But if
rider.
I'm thinking of neighbors getting together and saying, let's go get our groceries today.
One neighbor should call and book a group ride for your
And the
trip.
cost to that would be?
Again, you'll work with our dispatcher. If they're all coming from the same place, it would be the 70 cents a kilometer.
Okay.
If they're coming from multiple places and there's deadhead kilometers or varying wait times, that would be built by our dispatcher. And it would be built on a cost recovery basis, plus perhaps a very small, minute amount. And recognizing that the goal is to not make it a financial hardship for passengers.
Okay, thank you.
Bearing in mind, if a driver has to wait for your group for 2 hours, and we charge your group $12.50 an hour to wait, if it is a driver who's been with us for 10 years, we're paying him $16 an hour. So we do have to operate on a cost recovery model as well.
Thank you. And the other thing on the funding comparison and the ask, and I'm prepared to support, I'll say right now, I'm prepared to support putting additional funds in the budget, which would be discussed at budget time. But I just want to say we're not the size of HRM, of course, financially by any stretch. And I just, I'm sure council's aware, but I just want to say we do provide the office space that you use at a extremely favorable rate below market value. So we do contribute in that way, I believe, as well. And I just thought that was worth mentioning. So, no, very glad to hear from you. Glad the service is available for those who need it. And thank you.
Thank you, Warden. Next up is Councillor Ian Knockwood.
Thank you. I know you guys provide a good service and all that, but when you mentioned Eskasoni, like, do you know what that's all detains? Like, I'm from Indian Brook, and I see the van once in a while. I don't know where I see it on Indian Brook or in the village of Shibanakity, but I know it's a good service. But do you ever talk to the community of Indian Brook, the chief and council out there, to do partnerships or anything like that?
I would welcome that opportunity.
Yeah, I think you should approach them because there's a big need there too for people to do travel for appointments and like it says. We live out the beaten path of Shibanakity, so we have a large community out there. I think it'd be a good idea to talk to them.
That would absolutely be welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Knockwood. Next on the list, Councillor Eli Musa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How do we pay for everything? So we have the 2020, 2021. Do you have anything like, I see the COVID-19, 120,000, give you a push. So before, in the years before, what was this number offset by?
So I'm not sure I understand the question.
The $120,000 from COVID-19 wage subsidy.
Oh,
So how did you manage to fulfill your, like, I see you're on budget with that, even with that.
Mm-hmm.
So before that, where this money was coming from? Like, what
that would have
did you
been
lose?
fair subsidy.
Fair subsidy.
That there would have been a fair amount of that in fair subsidy when we weren't. I'm not the bookkeeper. I didn't. I don't complete the applications for the subsidies, and the application is based on what you were earning that particular period of time the year before, and you had to have a reduction of a significant percentage in order to be able to apply.
So you lost some fundraising and stuff?
We lost
like-
fundraising, we
Yeah, so-
lost corporate donations, we lost funding, and we lost wage fair subsidies.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Musa. Next up, Councillor Keith Rhino.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you for the valuable service you provide. But at this time, I would move that this be placed on the budget of the upcoming budget process with the intent of trying to increase the amount going forward, and the discussion at that time take place. Thank you. Or so moved.
We have a motion. Your seconder, seconded by Councillor Knockwood. On before the motion, Warden Rolston.
It's to the motion. Anyway, I'm just wondering, through you to staff, in order for it to reach budget discussions, do we need to attach a number for it to go into those discussions, which would either be changed, you know, whatever, but do we need a number, Sue?
That was not my intent. If on the move, from the mover of the motion, that was not my intent. My intent is to.
I'm
move
asking
an
staff
increase.
if that's something they need to put it in the budget document before I decide how I'm going to vote on the motion.
Okay, I think the CAO wants to speak.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, certainly having a number, we could start with a number in the presentation to put in the draft document. If we come to council with the budget prepared, and knowing that there was an increase in this grant amount that council wanted to consider, you're sort of starting behind the eight ball with your budget before you even get there. So if there is a number that you have in mind, that would be great. If not, we can bring you a balanced budget, which we have to bring, and then we can try and find money to offset that request after.
Is there anything else, Warden?
See how it goes. I'll move an amendment to the motion that for budget purposes only, we increase the amount by $35,000 to $50,000 for the draft budget for discussion purposes at that time.
We have an amendment. Seconded by Councillor Hebb. Councillor Rhino to the amendment.
$5,000 in there, I think is a little bit over the top. If you had increased it by 5 and then with the intent of in thing, I could support that. But at a 35,000 right off the cuff, you know, I just can't support that. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Knockwood to the motion.
Yeah.
To the
can you-
amendment.
Yeah, to the amendment. Can you say the amendment again? Like, I kind of.
It's simply to include in the motion that when the draft budget comes forward for discussion and for decision, that staff would have put an extra $35,000 in the draft budget so that it's there should we decide to make an increase. It can always be removed. It just, yeah.
Okay, that's sort of the draft budget total
Yes.
overall, right?
For when we do our council
Yeah.
budget, that instead of 15,000 being put in the draft budget for this service, it would be 50,000 put there for discussion purposes.
Okay, thanks.
Seeing nobody left to speak. Question on the amendment. Go to the vote. Votes are in. Motion is passed with Councillor Rhino voting nay. Now, we have the amended motion. Is there any discussion on the amended motion? Question on the amended motion. Go to the vote. And the motion is passed. No. Yeah. The motion is passed unanimously. All right. If council has no other questions for our presenters, I'd like to thank them for coming in today, and we wish you guys all the best over the holidays.
Thank you. We
Thank
very
you.
much appreciate your time.
Next we have on the schedule, we have committee vacancies. And I will turn it over to the CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just going to get back there. So, Mr. Chairman, with the election of the former Deputy Warden, McDonald's, to the Legislative Assembly of Nova Scotia, we do have some vacancies that need to be filled. We also have a new agreement with the East Hants Arena Association, which includes council representation on their board, one member on the executive and one member on the board. So those positions do need to be filled, and I would turn it back over to you to manage that process.
All right, thank you. So first, we're going to be looking for nominations for the Infrastructure and Operations Committee Vice Chair. Councilor Walter Tigney.
Can I nominate myself for that?
Councilor Musa.
Okay.
I would like to nominate Councillor Tingley for that vice chair for the infrastructure and operation.
Councilor Tingley, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Deputy Warden Mitchell.
I'll nominate Councillor Hibb.
Councilor Head, do you accept the nomination? Nomination was declined. Deputy Warden Mitchell. Oh,
No, I'm done.
okay. Thank you. Seeing that there are no other nominations, we appoint Councillor Walter Tingley as Vice Chair of Infrastructure and Operations Committee. Next up, Corporate and Residential Service Committee Chair. Warden Ralston.
I would nominate yourself, as you're currently vice chair of the committee. I would nominate Councillor Perry to chair Corporate and Residential Services.
I'll accept the nomination. I'll open the floor to any other nominations. Once, twice. Thank you so much. Corporate Residential Service Committee Chair will be by myself, so that leaves us now a vacancy for Vice Chair of Corporate and Residential Service Committee. So I'll be looking for nominations for Vice Chair of Corporate and Residential Service Committee. Councillor Musa.
I nominate Councillor Tingley for vice chair of corporate and residential committee.
Do you accept the nomination, Councillor Tingley?
I do.
Hold on here, there we go. Warden Ralston.
I would nominate Councillor Garden Cole as vice chair.
Councillor Garden Cole, do you accept the nomination for Vice Chair for Corporate Residential Services? No? Trying to get to you, Councillor Rano. There we go. Councillor Rano.
I nominate Councillor Eldon Hibb.
Councillor Hebb declines. Deputy Warden Mitchell.
I'll nominate Councillor Knockwood.
Councillor E. Knockwood, do you accept the nomination? It's been declined. Is there any other nominations? Seeing no other nominations, congratulations, Councillor Tingley, Vice Chair Corporate Residential Services. Next up is Audit Committee. Oh, I guess that would be myself. Moving on to Source Water Protection Advisory Committee. We need a chair and vice chair, so we need 2 names for this one. Councillor Rhino, well, we'll start off with the chair.
The chair, I nominate Cassandra Garden Cole.
Councillor Garden Cole, you accept the nomination for chair of the Source Water Committee? Yes. Accept the nomination. Are there any other nominations? Seeing no other nominations, congratulations. Now we'll be looking for a vice chair for the Source Water Protection Advisory Committee.
I'd nominate Councillor Tingley.
Councillor Tigney, do you accept the nomination?
I do.
Been accepted. Deputy Warden Mitchell.
I'll nominate Councillor Eisner.
Councillor Eisner, do you accept the nomination? Source Water Protection.
Source Water.
Vice Chair.
Vice Chair.
I do.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Seeing that we have 2 nominations, we'll go to a vote. Oops, sorry. Councillor Head.
Mr. Chair, if I may, while we're waiting here, maybe through the CAO, maybe I can get some clarification. When we are here as councillors, there's a lot of external committees that we are supposed to supply councillors for that. Is there anything in place that I know a lot of us are involved in 2 or 3, maybe even more than that. But it would only be fair for at least make sure every councillor is on one of those committees or more. Is there any policy in place or anything like that, or just, so there's nothing there? So some councillors can be in 4 or 5 committees and other councillors don't have to be in any? Okay. Thank you.
So, councillors, you have a vote between Councillor Eisner and Councillor Tingley for Vice Chair of the Water Protection.
Kim, we're just confirming Atlanta as the non-voting member.
Okay, congratulations, Councillor Eisner. You're the Vice Chair of the Source Water Protection Advisory Committee. We will now be looking for nominations for the Vice Chair of the Accessibility Advisory Committee. Oops. Councillor Hebb.
I nominate Councillor Knockwood.
Councillor Knockwood, do you accept the nomination?
I decline.
We need a nomination for the Vice Chair of the Accessibility Advisory Committee. Councillor Rhino.
That's not a member of, that's not a committee of the whole, correct? The advisory committee, or is it correct?
No, it's a separate committee.
So if it's a separate committee, that committee should be electing its own vice chair.
It's determined, the two counselors appointed to that committee serve as chair and vice chair, along with the public members.
So who's the members of that committee?
Right now, I am the chair of that committee, and it was the same committee that was put together with public members from the accessibility fields that brought together the East Hants Community Accessibility Plan.
So do we have a second member of council that's on that committee?
Right now, we do not. We only have
Okay.
one member. Councillor Musa.
I nominate Councillor Rhino for that.
Councillor Rano, do you accept the nomination? No. Warden Ralston.
Don't shoot me. I nominate Deputy Warden Mitchell.
Deputy Warden, do you accept the nomination?
I'll accept it.
Accepted by Deputy Warden Mitchell. Is there any other nominations? Congratulations, Deputy Warden. All right. First, we'll be looking for an executive member for the East Hants Arena Association. Be looking for nominations. Councillor Hebb.
I nominate Councillor Knockwood.
Councillor Knockwood, do you accept?
What does it detail?
CAO, I'll let you answer that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's two positions here for the East Hants Arena Association. This particular position would be an executive member on their board. So it would entail attending all of their board meetings as well as their executive meetings of their board, as well as any business that's dealt with by the executive outside of the board meetings themselves, which with the governance structure of the Sportsplex, they do rely on their executive members to make decisions outside of the board meetings themselves.
He's really busy, take a lot of time. I have to decline.
Okay. Decline. Councillor Musa.
I nominate Councillor Tangley.
Councillor Tingley, do you accept?
I do.
Okay, we have one accepted. Just let me turn off some of these mics and I'll get. All right, next up, Deputy Warden Mitchell.
A clarification, I'm still on the Arena Association as a public member. Is that going to cause a problem?
CAO?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, from discussions in council in the past, this question's been raised, and I don't see that anything's changed. Councilors can sit on external boards as non-representatives of council, depending on their personal interests.
So potentially there could be 3 votes from council. And that's my concern.
I think if you're serving as a public member, your vote would be as a public member, even though you are on council.
Thank you.
Councillor Rhino.
Well, if deputy warden is going to be there as a public member, I'd rather see them be there as a board member. And then with voting, there's no question. So with that, I would nominate Deputy Warden Mitchell.
Deputy Warden Mitchell, would you accept the nomination?
I will, under the caveat that when my council term is over, that I will go back as a public member, and I'll ask the association about that.
That would be their choice.
Their choice.
Okay.
Warden Rolson.
No? Just going to
Okay.
ask if Councillor Mitchell would be more comfortable being in council.
Okay. Deputy Warden, are you still on or are you good?
I'm free, thanks.
Okay. Okay, council, we have 2 nominations, so we'll go to a vote. Your nominations are for Deputy Warden Mitchell or Councillor Tingley. Thank you. Ms. Warden?
We have clarification. We're voting now for the member of the executive?
The executive member.
Okay.
Congratulations, Deputy Warden Mitchell. Now, we'll be looking for a board member for the East Hants Arena Association. Councillor Hepp.
I nominate Councillor Knockwood.
Councillor Knockwood, do you accept?
Yes.
Warden Ralston.
Yeah, I would nominate Councillor Tingley, because I know he had expressed an interest in.
Okay.
Arena
Councillor Tingley, do you accept?
I will, yeah.
Okay.
Chair,
One second.
I'll decline if he's interested in it.
Councillor Knockwood is withdrawing. Is there any other nominations? Congratulations, Councillor Tigney. You are now the board member for the East Hants Arena Association. And the last thing on our docket here today is we need to confirm a non-voting member, Director of Parks and Recreation, Alana Tapp, as a non-voting member. All those in favor? Aye. Do we need a motion? Okay, we need a motion for that. Sorry. Moved by Councillor Rhino, seconded.
We need a motion for the whole thing.
Okay, but we confirm that one and then we'll do, okay. All right. So, we're gonna need a motion that the Infrastructure and Operations, or move the Corporate Residential Service Committee recommend the council approves the following appointments. Infrastructure and Operations Committee Vice Chair, Councillor Tingley. Corporate and Residential Services Chair, Councillor Perry. Vice Chair, Councillor Tingley. Audit Committee, Councillor Perry. Source Water Protection Advisory Committee Chair, Councillor Garden Cole. Vice Chair, Councillor Eisner. Accessibility Advisory Committee, Vice Chair, Deputy Warden Mitchell. East Hants Arena Association Executive Member, Deputy Warden Mitchell. East Hants Arena Association Board Member, Councillor Tingley. East Hants Area Association, non-voting, Alana Trapper, Director of Parks, Recreation and Culture. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Question's been called. We'll go to the vote. And the motion is passed unanimously. I'll also be looking for a motion to destroy all the voting ballots. So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. There we go. There we go. We're on to the next thing. Building inspection staffing. There'll be the director, John Woodford. Go right ahead. As soon as I get to you with.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, there we are.
We will. There's only two items left. We're gonna conclude corporate residential, and we'll go for lunch.
Okay,
Have the Laker people coming before we can go to lunch. Why don't we do these two after lunch?
Okay.
shall
All
I
right,
carry
in
on?
discussion with the warden, we're just, if the Laker is here, we're gonna adjourn, go take the photo, and then we'll do these two items after lunch, where we convene corporate residential services. Are they here and ready for the photo?
They're not here yet, they're on their way, so we can finish up and then meet them in the lobby.
Okay. So we'll continue on with this presentation, and if the Laker people show up, we'll break for that and then return to this after lunch. Is that the will of council? Councillor Head?
Mr. Chair, we've gone through this for a number of years, and 12 o'clock is dinner time, and I've made this very, very clear. And here we are postponing, it's 10 after 12 now. We want to be doing this, and then we got to go through the Laker. We're talking 12:30, 1:45, and we got to be back here 1:30. And it just seems to me that there's always a push on at dinner time. And we had no break this morning, none whatsoever. And it's upsetting to me that we're not following protocol here, so thank you.
Warden Rolson?
Oh, no, mine was just on from before. So. Extend the lunch hour.
Would it be the will of council to extend the lunch hour then? So they're not so rushed and have a lunch after we take part in this? Would that be acceptable? Or is it the will of council, they would like to end right now and break for lunch and then return? Councillor Musa?
I think if someone wants to go for lunch, I think we should go, because some people, maybe for health, for something, they have to have their lunch at a certain time. I think we should respect that. Thank you.
Okay. Warden Rolston?
I have no problem breaking now for lunch. My only concern is that Pat is on his way. And I don't know how many other setups he might be trying to do today. I assume he must have run late at something to be not here yet, so.
All right. Well, I will say we are going to adjourn for now for lunch and reconvene back. Those councillors who wish to stay for the photo with the Laker are welcome to do so. Those who wish to continue on to lunch can do that as well. Is everybody okay with that? We'll reconvene back at
1:45.
1:45. We are now on break for lunch.